Worship, the Deputy Mayor and colleagues.
Good morning, everyone. Can you please remain standing for prayers by the Mayor's Chaplain, Canon Brian Pippin, before we start the meeting?
First of all, can I call you to a moment of silence as a memorial to the late Sarah Richards, who served this borough and this council and community over 40 years. Grant her, O Lord, eternal rest, and let light perpetual shine upon her. Let us pray. Our prayers for this council and this community and this world today are on the theme of Holocaust Memorial, which of course was yesterday. O God, we bring to you, as we remember the sin of the world, our failures and shortcomings, the mindless destruction of life and the cruelty of the Holocaust carried out against Jews, gay men, lesbians, Jehovah's Witnesses, gypsies, the mentally and physically disabled, Freemasons, trades unionists, black people, political opponents, non-Jewish Poles and Slavs, and lastly, among others, Christians who stood up and spoke out against the Nazis. We remember too those killed in the genocides of Armenia, Bosnia, Cambodia, Rwanda, Darfur and other places. We remember the joy of living that was extinguished in so many cities, towns and villages. And so, O Lord, we pray that we may always affirm all communities and break down all barriers within society, so that all within this borough of Torfaen, in this country and across the world, may live together with mutual respect, so that the terrible atrocities of the past may never be repeated. We make this prayer to you, O God, that all our efforts and the efforts of this borough, council and its work and its purposes may foster and build up the communities in its care, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Please be seated. I'd like to remind you all that this council meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so we are all on camera. Please be aware that you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. There is no need for members to stand. Cameras are focused on people sitting down. Can you remember to speak clearly into your microphones, please? And can I say it's my first meeting, so bear with me. Be gentle. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting today. Councillors, officers, members of the press and public, anyone else attending, anyone watching the meeting via the webcast. I'd like to welcome our newest councillor, Nigel Davis. Welcome. Please can all mobile phones and other noisy devices be put on silent. If there is an emergency alarm, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic car park. If we have any motions or amendments during the meeting, I will need them to be clear, please, before we go to the vote. Agenda item 1, attendance. The attendance register is going around the room. Please can all members sign it and send it on. Agenda item 2, apologies. Lead Officer, Councillor Member Support, Richard Gwinnell. Have we any apologies?
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Phil Seaborn, Councillor Giles Davis and Councillor Keith James.
Members, are there any other apologies?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Councillor Wayne Tomlinson.
Agenda item 3, members' interests. Monitoring Officer Linda Willis, do you have any advice for members, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. As usual, I've had discussions with members beforehand, so I am aware of some of the interests that need to be declared. I know in item 12, the leader will want to declare personal interest as the council-appointed company director of the SRSBS. Is that correct, Leader? Then on item 20, there's a motion by Councillor Mary Barnett, and that asked for support for the Wales United Against Fascism Gwent group. Councillor Barnett will want to declare that she's a member of that. That's a personal interest. I think there may be other members of that group amongst councillors. Would anyone else want to declare personal interest at this point, please?
Okay.
Fine. We'll record all those interests.
Linda, I would like to declare my question 1, member questions, as a personal interest, because I am a governor of Lantanam School.
That's the question you're actually
Yes.
posing. Yes, that's fine. So we'll declare that personal interest. Other than that, if there are interests that occur to members as we go through, then perhaps they declare. Councillor Ashley?
Regards to pollinators, a membership of Friends of the Earth, obviously it's a campaign they're running at the moment.
OK, we will note that one.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think we're complete. Thank you.
Members, can you make sure that any interests are also written down on the normal form, please? Agenda item 4A, minutes, 3rd of December 2013. Can someone move that the minutes are correct? We all agreed? Thank you, members. The minutes are agreed. Agenda item 4B, minutes of the 10th of December 2013. Can someone move that the minutes are correct? We all agreed? Thank you, members. The minutes are agreed. Agenda item 5, updates on actions. Members, the updates on what has been done to implement our previous decisions start on page 48 of the agenda. Are there any comments or questions? No? Councillor Morby?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Could I give a couple of comments in relation, firstly, to item 11.8, which is about the post-inspection action plan, just to advise members that the Recovery Board, appointed by the Welsh Government, is meeting this Thursday, and following that meeting I hope to be able to give some sort of update report to members about how that meeting has gone in relation to our post-inspection action. And in relation to 1834, in respect of Welsh medium education, just to report, if it's not clear from the minute or the action point already, that the admission numbers for all schools in Torfaen, the closing date is the end of this week. Following that closing date, I hope to be able to consider what pressures there may be on Welsh medium primary schools for September 2014 and to review arrangements for that beginning of the new academic year, and will of course not only advise members but consult the governing bodies as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is everyone happy to note the updates? Thank you, members. They're noted. Move to agenda item 6, consultation monitor. Members, the consultation monitor starts on page 52 of the agenda. Leader, do you wish to comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A version of the consultation monitor is reproduced in the Council agenda, indicating the nature of the consultation, who it's been undertaken by, who will respond on behalf of the Council, and by when. The monitor is up to date, and at the 16th of January, I would ask members to note its content.
Members, are there any other comments? Is everyone happy to note the consultation monitor? Yeah. Thank you, members. That is noted. Agenda item 7, petitions. We have no petitions for today, so we'll move straight on to the next one. Agenda item 8, public question time. We have 2 public questions for today's meeting, shown on the sheet circulated around the room. Dr. Rose Dentis, can you come to the front and ask your question, please?
Good morning, everybody. Could the Council explain why a motion proposed at a recent Council meeting to oppose evictions of social housing tenants who are in arrears due to the bedroom tax was not adopted, while neighbouring Rhondda Cynon Taf Council have adopted such a policy?
Councillor Gwynaira Clark, Executive Member for Housing, Planning and Public Protection. Can you reply, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Dentis, for bringing this question. It is my understanding that Rhondda Cynon Taf have accepted a motion made to the Council that suggests that registered social landlord boards adopt a no eviction policy. However, as a council with housing stock, Caerphilly Council did not approve a motion for a no eviction policy. As my response to last Council suggests, there are concerns as to how tenants would be affected if rents were not paid, as well as the business plans and the viability of housing associations. While still being opposed to the bedroom tax, Torfaen Council are working closely with registered social landlords to provide support and advice to tenants who are affected to ensure that any difficulties are minimised.
Thank you. Dr. Dentis, do you have a supplementary question?
I do. Oh, yes, I do. It's basically asking for an update of a question I asked in July, and I'd like to ask it in Welsh, please. Ydy'r cyngor yn ymwybodol o faint o bobl sydd wedi colli eu cartrefi oherwydd y treth a wyliau? Beth yw'r oblygiadau am adnoddau'r cyngor gan gynnwys staff?
This is a translation of Dr. Rose Dentis' supplementary question. Does the Council know how many evictions have so far occurred arising from the bedroom tax? What have been the implications for Council resources, including staff?
Thank you very much for that supplementary. I just wish that I understood the Welsh language, because it's a very proud language, and I feel very sad that I don't speak it myself. In answer to your supplementary question, no, we have no notice, and I'm in constant touch with RSLs and Bronavon as to whether there have been any evictions due to the bedroom tax. I'm given to understand from both of these authorities that as to date they can't separate the difference between the debt caused by the bedroom tax and the normal arrears, but I will monitor it and I will certainly keep you updated, as I will with all members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Thank you, Dr. Dentis. Would you like to go back to the gallery, please? Can I ask Richard Morse, would you like to come to the front and ask your question, please?
Bore da. Ydy'r cyngor yn ymwybodol o'r cefnogaeth gan cyngor undebau llafur Torfaen am ei benderfyniad i ollwng i faneri dydd Gwener Rhagfyr y Chweched fel teyrnged i Nelson Mandela?
This is a translation of Richard Morse's question. Is the Council aware of the support from Torfaen Trades Union Council for its decision to lower its flags on Friday, December the 6th as a tribute to Nelson Mandela?
Leader, would you like to reply, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I made the decision to lower the flags on Friday, December the 6th, after learning of the death of Nelson Mandela, and very much welcome the support of the Trades Union Council for that move. I'm sure that there are many councillors in the Chamber, myself included, that remember the extensive support that councillors and trade unionists gave to the anti-apartheid movement. I think that shows a lot about the values of fairness and liberty that we share in Torfaen. That whilst we concentrate our efforts on the job we have to do locally, we also oppose injustice wherever it occurs. I therefore welcome the opportunity to go on record and thank Torfaen Trades Council not just for supporting of lowering the flag, but for the work that has been done by that organisation in conjunction with this local authority over many, many years. And when I announced at that meeting people like Ken Holmes and Dr. Danny Mahaja, they were very solid trade unionists, regular members of the Trades Council, and you did play a very important part, and we thank you for that.
Mr Morse, do you have a supplementary question?
Treuliodd Nelson Mandela gydol I oes yn ymgyrchu yn erbyn hiliaeth, a felly ydy arweinydd y cyngor yn meddwl bod hi'n dderbyniol I aelodau'r cyngor fynegu cefnogaeth a fforymau cyhoeddus fel Facebook I droseddwyr hiliol fel cyn arweinydd yr EDL Tommy Robinson.
This is a translation of Mr Richard Morse's supplementary question. Nelson Mandela campaigned against racism throughout his life, and therefore does the leader of the council think it's acceptable for members of the council to express support on public forums like Facebook for racist criminals like the former leader of the EDL, Tommy Robinson?
Thank you very much for that. That's the gentleman who's just gone to jail, isn't he, that's bankrupt, yeah. No, I think it's appalling, actually. I think it's disgusting that members of any council express views on Facebook of that nature. Patently, they're either ignorant to history or weren't present when those things took place in Torfaen and don't understand it. So they're better to be pitied than blamed, and I think that we are very pleased that the Trades Council is always there watching, because as Reverend Canon Pittinger said, the Holocaust, which some of these people deny ever happened, first of all targeted gypsies, trade unionists, and people who were least able to defend themselves. We think, certainly there are most of us think on this council, that you play a very important part in ensuring that these things are checked and are constantly monitored in order that we don't get into another situation as we did then. Thank you for your support, and thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you, Mr Morse. We now move to agenda item 9, announcements. Leader, do you have any announcements today, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. A couple of announcements. First of all, I want to talk about the webcasting of these meetings. And I know that Ed is going to bring forward a report and talk about it later on. But I want to make a very, very fundamental point. And that is, webcasting of these meetings are the most authentic version of what took place. And whether by accident or otherwise, people can always make mistakes. So it's very, very important that we have a copy of the original webcasting results. Now, the current situation means that we've got to send it away for 3 days. Ed will explain this. Why, I don't know, but anyway, I'm sure he'll explain it. But what I've asked for assurances of the members and of the officers, and they've given it me, is that when the webcast is actually taking place, it will be recorded in this meeting and it will be available to members immediately after that. That will ensure that now and in the future, nothing can't happen to it, and we'll have the original record. That's the one announcement. The next announcement is about the transfer station. A copy of the plans for the proposed extension of the household waste recycling centre at New Inn will be on display in the members' room for your information. The planning application is not yet determined, but the plans are available for people to see. The next announcement, members will know that I'm the champion for sustainability. I intend to stand down from that and hand that over to a younger member of the council who's very, very keen and is passionate about sustainability. And I think that it's appropriate that somebody like this individual could take over the helm of this. And so I will be standing down. David Daniels will be taking my place, and I'm sure, David, you'll do a good job. That's that part of the announcement. And the next one is, and this is very good, really proud of this, and he's sat at the back there. I'd like to congratulate Keith Wright on being awarded the British Empire Medal, BEM, for services to the community. Keith Wright has worked for Torboyne and swept the streets of Pontypool Town Centre for over 30 years. Keith joined the council in 1981 and is well known within the local community for the dedication and good humour with which he carries out his role. He received the medal as part of New Year's Honours List and will be invited to a special garden party at Buckingham Palace later in the year. The date, I understand, is closely guarded secret. Keith is originally from Trevethin, but now lives in Swansea and remains a Ponty boy at heart. It is not the first time Keith's hard work has been recognised. He received the Public Servant of the Year award at 10 Downing Street in 2002. Keith will be presented with his medal by the Lord Lieutenant later in the year, and I hope Council will join me in congratulating him. I understand now that we can have a photograph taken in with yourself, Madam Mayor, and myself. Then we who's got that information? Good. You ever go? Can I ask you to come down, Keith?
Chief Executive, do you have any announcements?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we move on to agenda item 10, Budget 2014-15. Nigel Aurelius, Assistant Chief Executive for Resources. Can you represent your report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, my report starts on page 56. Public funding, the public funding challenge remains significant. I'm sure there's no members in the Chamber that are unaware of that. The UK Government and the Welsh Government have made significant choices. 2014-15 is a very difficult year for local authorities, and it changed fundamentally over the summer that's just gone. Our forward indications were for a cash flatline or a marginal reduction, and then it actually transpired to be a 4% reduction in our funding, or around £6 million less. So the budget is within that context. There's no chance to avoid or deny the difficult choices we and all councils have to face, and I'm sure members will be aware that a number of councils are starting to announce their budgets, and they're full of difficult choices and decisions. And the funding difficulties are not a situation that's going to end anytime soon. The first part of the report is on the final revenue settlement on page 56. That came out just before Christmas on the 11th of December. We gained slightly on that. Two reasons. One, our council tax base changed slightly differently to the rest of Wales, so we gained a small amount on that. And the pensioners' grant was put into the settlement. It's an unhypothecated sum of money now, and it will be for members to determine, as part of the final decisions that will come in February and March, how they wish to use that money. The report brings out that we've had some further grant information. I mean, this has been subject of comment in the Chamber before. We still haven't had it all. That we have had is broadly in line with budgets, but we're still waiting for some significant ones. In terms of where the budget is at the moment, we had a joint scrutiny committee on the 20th of November, followed by a member seminar. There was full information on all our savings as part of that scrutiny. The savings were out early and with much more detail than had been in the past. And those savings were gone through as part of the joint scrutiny in what was a 4-hour meeting to discuss them in detail. Our overall budget approach has been one of giving the uplift in relation to schools and protecting social care relative to others. We've protected social care at a cash flatline, and all other services have had to find their pressures and -4%. I would say, though, that protecting social care at a cash flatline by no means alleviates all their pressures, and indeed it's probably as difficult for social care to achieve a cash flatline as for other services to achieve -4%. The joint scrutiny conclusion is there on page 58, and on the whole the joint scrutiny offered support for the savings, and that's why they're coming forward now for approval as part of this committee. There were a number of corporate measures that we were putting forward as part of the budget, and they're within the report with some commentary on them. We're obviously trying to seek to avoid any compulsory redundancy for those posts at risk, and we will be using Profile and the voluntary redundancy trawl that is currently undergoing to help mitigate those at risk, as was the subject of last week's member seminar. Capital will be dominated by 21st century schools, and there's no major new recommendations at the moment in this report. There are two minor allocations. One is in respect of the Household Waste Recycling Centre that's just been referred to, a small amount of prudential borrowing out of 2015-16 to allow that scheme to proceed. And we need to confirm that our forward proposals for highways, agreed this time last year, will not be reduced, so that this council benefits from the local government borrowing initiative funded by the Welsh Government. The next steps are there, outlined in 8, and the conclusions, and then in 9. I've referred to the fact that we've sought to protect schools and protecting social care. It's certainly not an easy budget. There are some very difficult choices and decisions within the mitigations, but the requirement for us to make those decisions is not down to actions we have taken, but down to the choices central governments are making. And the recommendations are there on page 62 for members.
Members, any questions or comments? Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The first question, the comment as well, Nigel, in relation to your report about the hopefully not compulsory redundancies. We've been very fortunate in the past not to have a forced redundancy situation, so I hope we can continue in that vein. The question I'd like to ask, Duncan, relates to the significant grants outstanding that you mentioned in your report. First of all, could you give me some indication of how many grants are outstanding? And you mentioned that there are significant grants outstanding, and will they have any impact on the budget forecast going forward?
I think I list the most significant one within the report, and it's the one on around concessionary fares and the Sustainable Waste Management Grant. We are expecting reductions in those grants. In terms of the Sustainable Waste Management Grant, we will have to wait for for the outcome of that, and then work that through with Christina and her colleagues in terms of the impact. But one of the reasons why I'm making a recommendation on the Housing Waste Recycling Centre is as a direct result of reductions that are being made in that grant. In terms of concessionary fares, that's although it will be a cutting grant, that will be difficult decisions that we will have to that you will have to make then as members in terms of its impact on the bus community and travel.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Rees.
Diolch, Mayor. This sort of builds on the question that Councillor Evans just posed, and it's it's a political question, so I'm going to direct it at Councillor Hunt. What are the reasons why the Labour government still hasn't confirmed all the grants promised at this late date?
Can I bring Councillor Hunt in?
I don't think that's something peculiar to either this year or this government. Governments of all colours have always tended to withhold some grants until later in the year, and that's something that we've been consistently campaigning about through the WLGA, both in terms of the amount of money that's put as specific grants as opposed to in the settlement itself, which is something we've campaigned about, and we've continually pressed the need to announce things as early as possible in the year.
Councillor Rees.
Just sort of a supplementary to that. Do you feel this delay is damaging the Council in its forward planning?
I would certainly, again, press the case for announcement of grants as early as possible in the year, yes, and for any grants that can possibly be rolled into the overall settlement, I would welcome that too.
Okay, any other questions? No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hunt.
Just to, I think it'd be remiss to pass by this report without thanking members for the contributions they've made to this budget round so far. We've tried to make it a deliberately drawn-out process. That's not just to bore you to death, although I'm sorry if we have done that with our bleak predictions about the finances that all councils are facing, not just ours, and that's true both in England and in Wales. But it's also to help give members as much of an input as possible into that. And going forward to next year and beyond, if there are any suggestions that people have for how we can take that further, I'm more than happy to listen. My door's always open on that. I'd also like to thank officers in this council for the mature way that they've approached such a difficult budget. I think there's two ways these things can go, really. Either departments can start competing against each other to sell the biggest story of difficulty and compete with each other, or we can work together to try and find a way forward that works across the council. And I'm pleased that officers, to the best of my knowledge, have taken the constructive approach there. I'd also like to thank the trade unions for their input throughout the year, and we've tried to put in place, building on the strong relationship that was here before, a sort of system of regular meetings with the unions to make sure that they know and understand what we're trying to do, especially in difficult times, and that we work together constructively. Nigel's referred to it, and I can lay it perhaps in more political terms, the difficulty that's facing all councils. A 4% cut in budget might not seem drastic just on the front of it, but when you take into account the services we have to protect and the challenges of pressure going forwards, that's led to the situation where we've needed to save the £11 million. And I'd love to be in a position where I could sell some kind of magic panacea where that didn't involve difficult decisions. But unfortunately, that's not realistic. So we've engaged with the fact that we've had to make difficult decisions. We can't avoid them. And whilst we engage with that, we also don't sort of bury our head in the sand or sort of throw our hands in the air. That doesn't excuse us from the need to set priorities. And I think in protecting social care from the need to save 4%, as Nigel says, that doesn't excuse them from the need to make difficult decisions, because the pressures on their budget are massive. But I think that shows that we're putting protecting the vulnerable first, and that's what we pledge to do. Also, in terms of honouring school budgets, I think that's important, and protecting employment. Now, I believe in protecting employment not just for its own sake, but because that's the best thing to do in terms of delivering services. Our staff, in my view, are the biggest asset of the council, and without them, no services get delivered. So I think it's important that we do whatever we can to avoid the compulsory redundancies. I welcome Councillor Evans, the fact that Councillor Evans welcomes that. I would say it's not fortunate, it's through planning over the years that we've managed to do everything possible in our budget decisions to avoid compulsory redundancies. I think profile going forward, which we've gone through members with last Monday, is an important part of that going forwards, trying to look at where gaps are going to arise and where people are in danger of their roles going, and looking to train our workforce so that it can adjust to the future. So that's going to be important going forwards. This isn't an ideal world budget. In an ideal world, for example, I would be recommending that we put in place a living wage for our employees, but unfortunately we've not been able to do that with a 4% cut in funding. In an ideal world, I'd like to further protect social care budgets. In an ideal world, I think there's lots of other things that councillors would like to do. Unfortunately, we can't. That's not because of our decisions. That's because of the decisions, in my view, of the UK government and an austerity agenda, which I think has real impacts on services on the front line. And I would like to repeat the point that I've made before, that I think ministers making decisions from the relative isolation of Whitehall would do well to visit places like Torvine, to visit maybe the food bank up the road, and see at first hand the devastating impact that their decisions are having.
Okay, members, the recommendations are shown on page 62 of your agenda. Nigel, would you like to outline the recommendations, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. They're to note the final settlement for 2014-15, to approve those mitigation measures which were subject to joint scrutiny on the 20th of November, as outlined in 6.1 in the link. Approve the funding in respect of the Housing Waste Recycling Centre, noted in 6.7. Approve that we make no reduction in our forward capital plans in respect of highways, as noted in 6.7. And then to note the next steps outlined and to note the risks in relation to 2014-15.
Thank you. Are we all agreed? Can I have a show of hands, please? For. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Thank you, members. That's agreed. We'll move on to agenda item 11, Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Nigel Aurelius, Assistant Chief Executive for Resources, can you present this report, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is largely an administrative a report in the sense that we have to approve a scheme, or the default scheme will apply, and you will use those. We will lose the ability to make the discretions. As members know, Council Tax Reduction Scheme, this is the first year, 2013-14. It was formerly Council Tax Benefit and formerly administered by the Department of Work and Pensions. It's now a local authority responsibility. In Wales, there was a decision to have a national scheme with minor local discretions to stop there becoming a postcode lottery amongst local authorities. It's a scheme based around 100% support. There was a sunset clause put in last year by the Welsh Government, and that was largely because of the late change to move it from a 90% scheme to a 100% scheme, and then hence it has to be reapproved this year. There's no significant change to the regulations. The report recommends adopting the prescribed scheme as amended by the uprating regulations, and then applying the same discretions as previously, and the discretions are there in 5.2 on page 68. The Welsh Government have put the top-up grant from last year into the settlement, and therefore local authorities in Wales find themselves in a better position to those in England, and our budget takes account of the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. The recommendations are there on pages 69 and 70 in paragraph 8.1.
Thank you, Nigel. Members, do you have any questions or comments? The recommendations are on pages 69 and 70 of the agenda. Nigel, would you like to outline the recommendations, please?
Yeah, it's recommended the Council note the making of the Council Tax Reduction Scheme prescribed regulations. That's the first one. Then to note the annual uprating regulations, and then to adopt the provisions within the regulations above the prescribed scheme, and the annual uprating regulations in respect of its scheme for the financial year 2014-15 as the Council's local scheme, and then there are 4 discretions which are noted there within the recommendations, and to note the outcome of the consultation exercise undertaken by the Council on the introduction of the Council Tax Reduction Scheme.
Thank you, Nigel. Are we all agree? Can I have a show of hands, please, for? Thank you, members. That's unanimous. Sorry. No, it's unanimous, Leader. Thank you. Can we move to agenda item 12, the Shared Resource Service Update? Christina Harry, Chief Officer of Neighbourhood Services, can you present the report, please?
Thank you, Deputy Madam Mayor. I'd first like to introduce my colleagues because the presentation of this report will require a team approach. I'd firstly like to introduce Matt Lewis, the Chief Operating Officer for Shared Resources Services, so SRS Public, and also Janine Franklin, the Business Manager for Digital Solutions. The purpose of the report today is to update Council on the development of SRS Public, which Matt will take you through, and also the development of SRS BS, so SRS Business Solutions, which myself and Janine will take you through. So I'll firstly hand over to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Just to take you through the paper on the points about the SRS Public provision. Sorry, is that better? Just to take you through the paper on the points around the SRS Public provision. To give members a background, just to make sure we've all got the same understanding, the SRS Public provides services to Gwent Police, Torfaen Council and to Monmouthshire Council, and it covers services for ICT right across education to the corporate sides, across many different departments. So the paper just takes us through kind of where it started from and the purpose of it, and then talks a little bit about going forward. The aspiration of the SRS was always to be providing ICT services to a number of organisations, and I think we'll see that start to build as time moves on. So it talks about bringing the ICT infrastructure together and the people that provide those services across the organisations. And we've reached, in my opinion, a really strong milestone over the last month or so, where we've now TUPE transferred all staff into a single host employer for the SRS, which is a huge, successful milestone for me. It talks about the updates that we provided in the past and then about the updates for this particular paper. So the key operating targets continue to be met for SRS Public. Again, that's providing services across a number of different organisations into different functions and departments across the organisations. So it talks about the strategic review that's happened over the last probably 12 months in total across the SRS. And that's resulted in us doing a number of things differently. And we've got 4 separate meetings that we've had 2 of so far that will review and look at things in a deeper fashion. So we're looking at governance, we're looking at finance, we're looking at the identity of the SRS, and we're looking at what the core services are that the SRS provides. Some of the outputs of that process so far have been a minimum service standards document so that everybody's clear on what the SRS is supposed to provide and what the targets are we're supposed to meet. And going forward on a weekly, monthly and quarterly basis, we'll be providing updates of the measures for that service so that we can all see how we're performing against what the minimum service standards are for us. Over the last 12 months, the SRS has achieved ISO 27001 certification, which is a security standard which gives us a rubber stamp to show that we operate the data centre to a particular standard. And that's really important when other people are looking to work with us because it shows that we look after our information and our data centre in a certain way. So again, hugely positive, and a really large amount of work has gone into that from our security teams and our infrastructure teams around that. We've completed the rollout of the PSBA. The PSBA, in essence, is a network of communications that works right across the public sector. It's a kind of cross-public sector project that started a number of years ago, and now all of our public buildings are connected to the PSBA. So in essence, that means that theoretically we can connect from this building to any other public sector building in Wales that is connected to that network. Again, the long-term aspiration of PSBA is that you can provide single services, single applications to all public sector organisations from one central location. So again, hugely positive for us, and that project is growing over time. More and more organisations are signing up to the PSBA. Another huge project that's been completed the last 12 months, the Isle in Wales project. So all the secondary schools have got all the equipment that they were expecting. The system itself is out, and it's being developed and enhanced as time goes on. There are more and more modules and pieces of functionality being added to that system, which greatly benefit children across Torfaen and Monmouthshire. It's a cross-authority project. We're probably not far away from having something, Office 365, embedded into the Isle in Wales product, which means that children will be able to use more tools, more functionality, more things to drag into that product and get benefit from enterprise agreements we've got with companies as well. Part of the work the development team has completed, applications such as Planning Together to help with child development plans in a single location for, again, multiple authorities. So we've got 8 organisations working with us on that, on a project that we've developed here in Torfaen and we've rolled out across other organisations. Our teams have been part of national procurement exercises for what the next generation of social services application will be. There's projects such as the Wisdom Bank, which is the lottery-funded project within Torfaen that our developers will be building, and that could end up being a global product that multiple people will be using to try and benefit and link younger people to more experienced people, and the other way around to try and help build communities. Bit of other work the infrastructure teams have been working on for us. We try and make sure that any project we do going forward is always multiple organisation, that we don't just focus on putting something in for Torfaen or something in for Monmouthshire or something for Gwent Police. We always try and make sure that it covers a number of organisations. And over the last 12 months, we've brought the kind of storage facilities that exist in Blanavon, where before there was one for Monmouthshire and one for Torfaen. Now there is just one for Monmouthshire and Torfaen. So that the saving involved in procuring that setup in the first place was around about £60,000-70,000. And the ongoing revenue cost linked to that will also be reduced because we're not doing things separately, we're doing them together. which again is a great example of what the SRS was originally intended to achieve. The paper just mentions the NHS Wales Informatics Service. The service they take from the SRS is to provide a room to house all of their equipment in. So things like single patient record and GP surgery systems, they're all either in Blynavan or moving to Blynavan. And MWIS are growing that facility over time as well to make the most of their investment in the same way that we do. So the final couple of statements from us on the kind of financial position. Last year there was a moderate underspend in the SRS, which gets rolled over to make sure that we can cover things for this year. And in line with Nigel's previous statement on the budget across Torfaen, for 14-15 it will be we'll have to take the pressures on in the SRS and drop it by 4% for the reductions as well. The plans are in place to achieve that have all been through finance and yourselves. So we're expecting to be quite a way under for the budget for 14-15 as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So now on to SRS Business Solutions. SRS Business Solutions is a separate company which was set up following Cabinet approval back in May 2011. The purpose of the company was to trade the spare rack capacity that is managed through MAT through SRS Public, and to sell that to the private, the third and the public sectors to generate income to support public services, so to bring that income back into the public sector. The company is owned by ourselves and Monmouthshire County Council. Gwent Police, whilst interested in participating with the company, they aren't able to trade, unlike ourselves as local authorities, which were under the Local Government Act, we are able to trade. But when trading as a company, we are bound by the requirements of company law, and the directors of the company are bound to act in the best interest of the company, i.e. to make it as successful as possible in terms of profit. As a company, SRS Business Solutions can secure contracts from private individuals and private companies through direct negotiation, because these bodies are not subject to public sector European procurement rules. However, if the company were to provide services to any public body, it could only do so if it had won the right to do so following the completion of an EU-compliant tendering exercise. Any company must consider state aid, and this has been satisfied and supported with external legal advice. In paragraph 713 of the report, the directors of the company are actually set out for you. And you will note that there are 2 directors per local authority, so that's myself and also the leader acting on behalf of Torfaen. And then there's 2 individuals from Monmouthshire County Council representing themselves. And also we have Graham Russell acting as the company's secretary. The initial business plan presented to Cabinet back in May 2011 was reviewed shortly afterwards following a change in circumstances, and the revised business plan was presented back to Cabinet in February and October 2012. Since then, a number of trading achievements have been made, and these include 3 contracts which have been secured to date, resulting in 13 racks being sold, and further opportunities are in the pipeline to expand that further. One of those contracts has resulted in £2.5 million of inward investment to the borough. And on the back of one of those contracts, we've invested in a profit share arrangement through a joint venture agreement, which will introduce a further revenue stream over the life of those contracts. Section 8.1 of the report shows the trading position of the company to date, and you will see that in 14-15 it is projecting a £10,000 profit, and included in that profit is £78,000 of income which will go directly into SRS Public as a direct result of SRS Business Solutions trading. And that is income that SRS Public would not get unless SRS Business Solutions was trading in the way it is. You will also note in Section 8.1 that there are losses. There have been losses borne by that company to date, and that isn't unusual in the setup of a new company. The losses of £16,000 in the first year trading are linked to time and cost to set up the company, and also the lead-in times needed to set up and agree the complex contracts that we now have in place. And typically they take about 18 to 24 months to set up. However, based on trading to date, SRS Business Solutions will be providing as a minimum of £78,000 of income direct to SRS Public moving forward. So in conclusion, both SRS Public and SRS Business Solutions, I hope you will see that it is very much a very good news story. Both the companies are trading and responding in the way that was initially intended. With regards to SRS Business Solutions, the purpose of the company was to sell surplus racks from SRS Public to create a revenue stream and an income back into public services, and that has been done and is projected to grow in the future. As such, the company is playing a key role in our digital regeneration strategy, which members have agreed as policy, and is also playing a key role in contributing to our medium-term financial plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. My first question is to Matt, and that's in regard to the statement that is made in the report, Matt, about the public sector organisation continues to grow. And you also said that we are built as time goes on. Can you be more specific why you were mentioning that in the report? That's the first question. And the other one is just for information. You mentioned that we have achieved the certification ISO 27001. How long does that certification stay in place, or do we have to apply for it again, or is it there forever?
Thank you. I'll take the first question. The public sector growth. Since the centre's been in existence, what we've seen is Enwys join, we've seen Torfaen, Gwemplis and Monmouthshire, and in the Enwys Hall now as well, there are other public sector organisations coming into the room. Swansea University is in there. And the GP surgeries, as part of the Enwys functions, come across into the hall as well. And I think going forward, as part of the work that was done nationally for data centre work, there was always a plan of 2 data centres nationally. So the southern part of that data centre pair, if you like, a pair of data centres so that you can provide resilience back and forth between a primary and secondary. The first of that pair was always going to be Blanavon. And I don't see that changing going forward. The facility is there. It's for public sector. There was public sector money invested in that centre, and it's available for other public sector organisations to join and be part of. And I only see that growing going forward, as there are numerous reports from Welsh Audit Office, from lots of different places, that suggest that doing things together, having one application, one service provided from a smaller number of places is much more cost effective going forward. And we know that there are just under 100 server rooms stroke data centres across the public sector in Wales that could easily be consolidated down into a smaller number. And we're in a very strong position to be able to provide services from that data centre across the public sector. And I guess that moves me on to the second point, which was to have confidence in a centre. It's great if someone else has audited that centre and can provide the answers without us having to continually provide the same answer over and over. So achieving accreditation such as ISO 27001 allow us to say to somebody, there's a badge on the front door of this building, so you don't have to ask us the 20 questions you were going to ask us, because you've got assurance from British standards there and the ISO Foundation that we do what we say we do. And that accreditation lasts for 3 years, but you need to have it reviewed annually. So on March 18th, in a month and a half's time, the accreditor will be back from British standards to go through with us and ask us a number of questions to check that we're doing what we say we're doing, so that you can give us the rubber stamp for year 2 to say, yep, you can keep that accreditation, and then come back in a year's time, and then 3 years is a fuller audit of what we're doing. So it's kind of a back to square one to check everything again, rather than just a top up throughout the process.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Can I ask my second questions, which are for Christina, in relation to the information she's recently given me. Christina, you mentioned about the police authority are not able to trade. We understand that. So will the police authority be able to take any financial gain out of the trading that Torfaen and Monmouthshire has? That's the one question. And the other question is the projected figures you mentioned for 2014-15. Are you confident of that projection?
Thank you. My colleague Janine will answer your first question, but in response to your second question, yes, we are confident. The business plan that we have now in place is robust, and we're delivering against that business plan, and our projections for 14-15, we are very confident that we will achieve them.
Thank you. In terms of the police are one of the three members, the founding members of the SRS. So every time the SRS transfers an asset to SRS Business Solutions to trade, it directly benefits from the arm's length transaction of that benefit. So it's highlighted in the report. So that 78,000 that will be paid in 14-15 goes directly into the SRS public budget. So that is split three ways between Monmouthshire Council, Torfaen Council and Gwent Police Authority.
Thank you for that, but I had to ask the question just for clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Haynes.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. My comments really are very much in relation to the business solutions arm of it. The company was set up almost 3 years ago with some public money, and to date it's yet to turn any profit. In the May 2011 Cabinet report, it says that it became apparent that there is significant private sector demand for the specialist services currently provided to the public sector. This demand has become apparent from contacts made by a range of private and third sector interests, including national and international household names. At that time, we were led to believe that the business plan was accurate and fit for purpose, which is why the funding was agreed by this council. I have here the business case summary that was supplied to Cabinet in 2011 and is vastly different. Year 2 projected profit of 151,000, year 3 projected profit of 314,000, and yet today we're seeing loss and projected break even. We were almost fed back in 2011 that it was the goose that was going to lay the golden egg at that point, but it looks like that goose has yet to deliver. I'm aware that since the business plan was sold to us in May 2011, that resulted in the agreement to fund, but that there was then very shortly a recognition that the original business case was optimistic and unrealistic, resulting in Cabinet further reports. We've had some unbudgeted spends of 400,000. So I sort of kind of applaud the early recognition of the problem, but I cannot believe that a professional business plan that was used to seek public funding failed to deliver that quickly. It was obviously not fit for purpose, and that is just unbelievable, and does raise some serious questions for me. So, unfortunately, I have very little faith in the new projections, so I therefore cannot agree the recommendation, because I need to see that there is a profit and that it's succeeding before I can sort of put my hand to note this success. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of questions, really, from the presentation that we've just received. You've mentioned, and whoever feels like answering these will be fine. There's 100 data centres across Wales, apparently, that could be consolidated. So let's imagine that we manage to obtain the business for those. What happens to those data centres, those 100 data centres that are being consolidated? And the other question I have is regarding SRS BS. Who would you consider your principal competitors are out in the marketplace? And in terms of bidding for private sector work, what do you consider your success rate to be in sales bids?
Yeah, I'll take the first one. The piece of work that was done was to look across the whole of the public sector in Wales to perform an audit of the current facilities that organisations have. So the report that says there are currently just under 100 data centres / server rooms it's like comparing a really expensive car to a really cheap car. You know, there are facilities out there that are not fit for purpose currently, and there are some other good facilities out there. And I think what the paper was suggesting was that there needs to be a standard defined, which on a national basis is not quite yet happened. There was going to be a standard defined that would say all of these server room stroke data centres, they fall under that level of standard, that you can give a chief executive assurance that that data is being looked after appropriately. And I think what they found is there are people who will class server rooms or data centres as a computer sat under somebody's desk, or a porta cabin that's sat out the back of the civic centre that's got a lot of equipment in there with a hole in the roof with water coming through. There could be a whole range of different quality server rooms and facilities out there. And when the national picture was, we can consolidate these down to a very small number, then there was investment made in a number of data centres to be able to provide that national facility. And that's why the national providers, like Enwys, that's why they're in Blanavon, because there's a recognition that that is a data centre that is capable, it's accredited, and it's able to provide the services that national provision needs going forward. They wouldn't put that into a porta cabin or into a computer under someone's desk in the back of nowhere. So that's the reason that they're talking about. Currently there are 100 of this thing. It's not a quality that's good enough to say, let's put everything in there, but Blanavon is. You know, and there may be one or two other facilities in Wales that would currently be able to be paired or triangulated with Blanavon to be able to provide a resilient national service for data centres across Wales.
In response to your second question, Councillor, within a 25-mile radius, we have no competitors that are selling the small amount of racks that we are. So we have a niche market here. There are some other providers in the area that are selling much larger quantities of racks, but you know, we are in a niche area, and I just reinforce that we have no competitors within a 25-mile radius.
Councillor Smith.
Surely the whole point of electronic infrastructure is that it isn't geographically restricted. So a 25-mile radius, I don't understand why that's relevant. Surely a competitor could be on Anglesey or in Haverfordwest. I don't see why physical proximity is relevant in this case.
We've sought some expert advice when we've been looking at the data hall and actually when pulling together the business case for the data hall. And it would seem that 25 miles is considered the sweet spot for people hosting racks. And businesses like to have their racks in close proximity so they can go in, see them, touch them, see what's going on. So when we've looked at the business case, we've looked at rack providers within the 25-mile radius that specifically provide these small amount of racks onto companies. We do have other wholesale rack companies in the area, but they look at selling on upwards of 80, 90, 100 racks at a time to large global companies.
Sorry, can I just add a final point on that as well? The PSPA network I mentioned earlier, the public sector network, the kind of one of the centres of that is based in Blanavon. So there's high-speed connectivity from all of the major centres around Wales into Blanavon. So again, that's another reason why the data centre you wouldn't particularly pick up everything that Torfaen and Monmouthone and put it in London, in Telecity, or in Paris or wherever. You know, Blanavon is right on the heart of that network and is positioned really strongly to be able to provide high-speed access for applications and services across all the public sector in Wales.
I'm sorry, I'm clearly failing to understand something here. If 25 miles radius is a sweet spot for people who want to use this kind of facility, and yet we're talking about potentially consolidating 100 data centres from across Wales into 2 or 3 locations, you know, Wales is bigger than 75 miles. I don't fully understand, I'm afraid.
When I refer to the 25-mile radius, I'm referring to the private sector companies in the area. So it's part of our regeneration strategy and looking to grow and help companies, SMEs, other companies who want to host their data in the area and also potentially bring in their premises and then potentially create jobs. The racks that Matt was referring to relate to the public strategy, which looks at sharing systems and sharing capability across Wales, across the whole of the public sector. you want to pick up a bit more on that?
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, I've got two actually, directed at the leader in his capacity as the director of SRSBS from the outset. Leader, 2 years ago, on the 12th of February 2012, yourself and the Cabinet met, the press were excluded, and you approved an unbudgeted sum of £400,000 to the SRS. To date, Council is still waiting for an explanation and breakdown of these public funds. I would like to know, are the figures in the SRS paper inclusive of this £400,000? And when are we as a Council going to get an explanation report on the breakdown, or do your Cabinet intend to keep it secret forever? My second question is, I asked the leader a year ago, and I'm finding it difficult to find the website for the cutting edge of technology in Wales, the SRS Blanavon website. Could someone furnish me with the website address? I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Right, well, thank you for your first question. Certainly, when you say that there was a cabinet where we excluded the press, whether that is the case or not, we need to look into that. The question on whether there is a website, I'm sure officers can answer that. Let me just say to members that if you require a detailed analysis and a detailed question and answer regarding the SRS, or indeed the SRS public, then I suggest that we have a seminar where all questions from members can be put forward, and officers can come to that seminar and answer those questions question by question. So there's nothing going on here. If you want that, then you can have it.
I'm happy to take the question on the website. We were successful in getting a .gov.uk address for the SRS. It's quite a long address, unfortunately, but it's shared resource service wales.gov.uk. So that website's up and running. It's been up for a number of months now. And what we're trying to do is, based on feedback from people that use the site and look on there, try and tailor what it's providing. So we're hoping to put things like surveys up on there so that staff can say, what kind of service they've received, so that we can start to improve services based on feedback coming through the site. And we're moving all of our staff to email addresses that relate exactly to that website. So we'll all be on SRS email addresses as well going forward.
Can I come back in on that, Madam Mayor? So there's your question 2 answered. Now, as far as the question 1 is concerned, I think that Linda Willis needs to either address that now, or we need, as I said, to have a seminar when that specific questions and other questions that members are concerned about can be answered in full.
Leader, I think there's obviously information that may be required by members, and it's probably something that it might be something for me to take forward after this meeting to see, to direct members to various reports, etc., be they exempt or not. That would I'd still be able to give members information. So perhaps if I can deal with that outside of the meeting when we know specifically what questions members may have, and I can deal with them that way.
Don't look at me, look at Councillor Harris.
I think that would be the best way to deal with it, Councillor Harris, because there's obviously a lot of range of issues that relate to both the public, the administrative section, and also the trading company and various reports in the past, and I think we need to get them absolutely clear and know exactly what your questions are. I think then you will be better informed. Thank you.
Can I just bring Nigel Aurelius in to just have a talk about the 400,000?
I believe the 400,000 is a sum of money that arose out of the investigation into the activities. I forget the exact timing of the report that went to Cabinet. I'm pretty sure it was then subject to a challenge at Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee and was discussed in full. I'm then equally sure that a commitment was given to come back from the then Deputy Chief Executive with full details of that once the criminal trial had concluded. That still remains the case. So I don't think there's any case of people hiding anything or avoiding it from public reports. I simply think the circumstances that surrounded that 400,000 when it was debated at Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee still hold true today, in terms of we are still waiting for the criminal trial and the outcome of that.
Okay, Councillor Harris, do you want to come
Yeah,
back
I'd just
in?
like to come back in on that. I appreciate that. I appreciate if there's a criminal investigation still ongoing, that you don't wish to disclose what the £400,000 is at this point. But my question included the fact that the figures given about the SRS, just keeping its head above water, does that include the £400,000?
The 400,000 was financed at the time and has no relevance now on the figures that are coming forward. It was funding that had to be approved and approved from reserves to finance the expenditure at that time. So it has no relevance on these figures.
Okay, Councillor Rees.
Addressing my comments basically to my colleagues.
Can I ask a question? Because Councillor Harris is jumping up and down. Are you happy with those answers?
So the £15,000 loss on the first year was actually £415,000 then?
No, we're mixing. I mean, we'll have to dig back out the Cabinet report and the Council report, but we're mixing up sums of money here. There was a variety of items of expenditure within that 400,000. Quite a sum of it was public, around the public sector, and as I go back to my statement that we can't go into the detail of it until the criminal investigation, the criminal trial has taken place. But there was some detail within the cabinet report. The reason we had a cabinet report at that particular time was we had to finance that expenditure in the year it had been incurred, which is what we did.
So what you're saying is the profit and loss is actually not the true reflection of the SRS as it is now. There's a lot of ambiguity there. It's not clear. The public are watching this. 400,000 was given two years ago from public funds.
Councillor Harris, I'm sorry, it's not the time or place now. They've said that we can't talk about it while it's proceeding, so I'm going to have to move you on now, sorry. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Rees.
Thank you, Mayor, for the second time. Hopefully not too many interruptions following what I've got to say. The people of Torfaen own this business and this entity, and we are their representatives. I don't feel like we've been informed enough to hold this company and this entity to account. A couple of points I'd like to raise is around how we haven't been able to scrutinise the SRS Business Solutions at all during its lifetime as a council, and also we've only partially scrutinised the SRS as a public entity, and I think these are issues that we need to address. I'd also like to say that the report paints a very rosy picture, which I wouldn't expect anything else from people who are responsible for and running those businesses. There aren't any there's no black holes in there. We don't really feel about what the risks are going forward in terms of a business. I'm not happy that there doesn't seem to be any sales targets for the next 1 to 5 years. There seems to be very little ambition about how we're going to go out and get the money, how we're going to go out and get the business. There doesn't seem to be any targets around what kind of return on investment we need to get. It's not ambitious. We don't know what it's for. It's not really driving the economy. We don't know about it. You may know about it. We don't know about it. And so how can people of Torfaen know about it? The other issue I want to bring to people's attention is about the company directors. And this is not any sort of slur or any way saying these are bad people or that their motives aren't correct. The issue I have is if we're going to drive a business, if we're going to drive a private business, we need to get experts who've got a record of success in IT. And looking at the board of directors there, with respect, I don't see that talent there. So what I'm going to suggest is I'm going to suggest an amendment to the report. I'm going to add on to the recommendations. I'm going to make a new recommendation 14.2, and with respect, hope colleagues will bear with me. I'm going to ask for the SRS Public and the SRS Private to be added to the annual work programme of the All Scrutiny Committee, and a scoping paper for the appointment of directors for SRS Private from the private sector be prepared for Cabinet within the next 3 months for a decision to progress that process. Is that clear?
Right, Councillor Rees, sorry, we need to have that in writing so it can be presented. So, got it. Okay, members, would you like to have a debate on this? Councillor Morby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Before we have a debate, I think it would be useful to have advice from the Chief Monitoring Officer as to whether or not, in view of the restrictions on our ability to debate these issues, whether there is any purpose, in fact, in adding that particular item to the work programme if the same restriction would apply within the Scrutiny Committee. So.
Sorry, Councillor Morby, I'm just trying to read through what the proposal is. I think it's the time limit is 3 months, and I think that would pose ongoing difficulty. So
I'm willing to withdraw the 3 months time.
So you could put it off for a long time. Then.
So there's no,
that will be for the decision for people that make the cabinet.
Sorry, so that it would be a future report at a suitable time. Would it help members, I think, at this stage, if we read out the amendment again? So I'll attempt to decipher it. So the amendment is added to, because I think your recommendation is merely that you note the current status and ongoing development of the SRS Public and the SRS Business Solutions. It's very important as we go forward that the two are kept separately. I just mentioned that. So added to that would be Councillor Rees's amendment, which is the SRS Public and the SRS Private, which is the SRS BS Limited, are added to the annual work programme of the all scrutiny committees and a scoping paper for the appointment of directors for the SRS Private from the private sector be presented to Cabinet in the future for a decision to progress the process. Is that sufficient? There's other writing on there, but that's not relevant. So on that basis, all the proposal actually is saying that there be it be added to the scrutiny committee. Well, the work of the council generally falls to one or other of the scrutiny committees.
Yeah, with the respect, it isn't on the work programme of the scrutiny committees, and it needs to be, and that's why I'm putting this forward.
No, but I thought in the context of the debate, just for members of the public as well as members to realise that the scrutiny function does cover everything, albeit that the work programme will select various matters as they come forward, which is the purpose of you putting this at this, that it be on the programme. The appointment of the directors, I think, again, is something that could be considered. So I don't have any objection with this as it is now drafted or proposed. Are members clear about that? Councillor Barnett? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, the point that you've made, Councillor Rees, about employing particular areas of expertise in the directors, I think is covered at the bottom of page 75, going on to 76, where it says, as the business grows, additional officers or members may be appointed and or independent or non-executive directors may be asked to join the board to bring private sector, third sector and industry expertise to the company. So I think the report already recognises that there might be.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett, for
the point. Can I ask the monitor to clarify that, because it does seem that covers the point. We've got no problems with bringing a further report forward, no problems with looking at whether there is additional directors required. Jeff has said that he's saying that report can come forward in 2 months' time. I don't think we'll have much to argue with that. But as Mary Barnett has just pointed out, and thank you for that, Mary, it's covered in the report.
Well, Leader, I think there's no time limit here, but obviously there is a proposal for amendment that's made by Councillor Rees, and it's now for councillors noting what you've said is in the report and the items of the debate now to see whether that amendment is being seconded.
Can I bring the officers back in, please?
Yeah, with regards to the scrutiny proposal, it is already, it's for members to determine what they wish to scrutinise or not. Our scrutiny process is very much member-led. I understand SRS Public was scrutinised last year, back in April, and to date, SRS Business Solutions hasn't been chosen for scrutiny by members. As ever, as officers, we would fully and wholeheartedly support yourselves if you wish to scrutinise those areas. With regards to the directors of Business Solutions, a report was presented recently to Cabinet to recommend myself as a director, and again through the process we have, you would have had the opportunity to pull that in if you disagreed with that recommendation.
Councillor Morby.
Thank you. It's really a point of order as to whether or not members of the Executive, the Cabinet, can vote on a direction by Council to scrutiny committees to deal with a particular item.
Councillor Hunt.
And just, I'm personally uncomfortable with voting for what scrutiny should or shouldn't discuss as a point of principle, really. That's not my, job, and you should tell me to get lost if I try.
Councillor Rees.
Yeah, I did check with scrutiny officers about the scrutiny of the SRS, and it was only partially scrutinised, not the whole entity. And the other thing is that you can only challenge a cabinet decision if you've got a certain number of people available to do that. For example, in your group, and the Plaid Cymru group is only 2, so we don't have that facility.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I often disagree with Councillor Rees, but this isn't one of those occasions. I think he's actually making a fairly sensible proposed amendment, so I'm content to support it.
Councillor Ashley.
I hasten to go into this, to be honest, but for once. But I believe what's been said, that scrutiny has a choice to scrutinise something or not, which has just been said. Is not the case, and it's up to the scrutiny committee whether they scrutinise something or not. So to actually vote in council to scrutinise something is not. We can't really do it, can we? It's up to the scrutiny committee whether it scrutinises it. Is that not the case?
Councillor Haynes.
I think we need to be a bit clear here. I think the reason that a scrutiny committee has not chosen the SRSBS very much is around the court case and the unbudgeted costs. We've been told consistently for the last year and a half, 2 years, that we can't discuss it, that we can't have information on what those spends were, so we've been unable to know and been unable to scrutinise. That's been raised here already. I fully support Jeff's motion in full, and I also think there should be a date element where the directors that are brought in that are experts in the field.
Thank you. Can I bring in Alison Ward?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I think there are some very important points made about whether Council can direct scrutiny committees as to what they put on their agenda. I wonder if Councillor Rees would have any objection to changing the wording of the amendment slightly so that Councillor inviting scrutiny committees to put this onto their agendas rather than insisting.
It's not for individual scrutiny meetings, it's for the all scrutiny committee meeting that we have about the budget, for example, which has lasted 4 hours, which will give us a good go at the SRS and the SRS Business Solutions. Seminars, frankly, aren't well attended and are only 2 hours on a Monday. We need something, in this case, we need a lot more time and a lot more depth and a lot more knowledge to really, really understand, on behalf of the people of Torfaen, how business is going to grow and how it's going to create wealth.
I think it's still an issue of whether Council can mandate scrutiny, and if the wording were changed slightly, then I think that would probably satisfy people's concerns.
I'll take your advice.
So can we read the amendment?
Just have a look. I think your amendment will be along the lines of Council invites the All Scrutiny Committee to consider adding the SRS Public and the SRS BS Limited to its annual work programme, and that a scoping paper for the appointment of directors for the SRS-BS from the private sector be presented to Cabinet at a future date.
Fine words, thank you.
Thank you.
We got a seconder?
Seconder.
Right, can we have a vote on the amendment then? All those in favour? Against? Abstaining? Okay, the amendment's carried. Okay, that amendment now becomes part of the recommendation, so we need to now vote on noting the recommendations to include the amendment. Yeah.
We need to vote on the report as amended.
As amended, right. So all those in favour?
Just a point of order on that, if I may, Madam Deputy Mayor. That part of that recommendation now relates to a decision that the Cabinet really cannot make a decision on, if you see what I mean.
Can I bring in Richard? Can I?
Yeah, Council agreed that amendment, so it becomes part of the recommendation. The whole report now has two recommendations in it. Right? As per page 80, 14.1 stays, and the amendment which has just been agreed is recommendation 2. Okay? So members need to vote again on that as a substantive, as a package. Now, if members want to vote differently the second time than they did the first time, they can. If they want to vote the same way, or they have reasons to vote the same way, they can. So we can run exactly the same again, but you're making a different decision. You're making a decision now on the recommendation on page 80 as it stands, with the amendment which has just been agreed. Is that clear?
Didn't clear at all. I really want to know: is it appropriate for us to then to abstain again on 14.2 because it's not one that we should be taking as a cabinet?
Can I just come in here, please, as a point of clarity? We should be looking at not 14.1, but under 15, altering that to read 15.1. So we've got 15.1 and 15.2.
Right, okay. Councillor Morby.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I think some of my colleagues on Cabinet are concerned that despite asking for advice, we haven't really been advised as to whether or not members of Cabinet can vote on a matter of direction or invitation to direct a scrutiny committee, and therefore during the first vote on the amendment we abstained, not because we're opposed to the idea of scrutiny, but because we don't think we should play a part in that. As that is now part of the substantive motion, think Cabinet members are of the same view that we will continue to abstain, albeit, again, we have no real issue with, if the rest of Council agrees, to invite scrutiny to look at that issue.
Okay, can I bring in Linda Willis, please?
Sorry, Councillor Morby, if members didn't think that they had clear enough advice, but I think inviting making an invitation to scrutiny is in order if members are so minded to do that. I don't think that interferes inappropriately with the scrutiny function.
I just choose to differ because I think that could be interpreted in different ways by people looking backwards at decisions taken by this Council. And if we're seen to be taking a decision, even inviting the Scrutiny Committee to do something, we could be criticised for that. And I don't think we should take that chance. That's not to say we're opposed to the idea. But
Madam Mayor, I think we should recommend that the Cabinet abstain on this matter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I think the advice is clear, members. It's up to you how you vote, and we can't advise you on that.
Right, okay, let's vote again on the substantive then. All those in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Okay. Thank you, members. That is carried. Okay, we move on to agenda item 13, pollinators in Torvine. Christina Harry, Chief Officer, Neighbourhood Services, can you present your report, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. The purpose of this report is, following Cabinet approval last week, we'd like to highlight the issues relating to pollinating insects to Torvine, and also to note the proposed measures to encourage and increase the number of pollinating insects across the county borough. Pollinators are an essential component of our environment. Bees, wasps, butterflies and moths are important pollinators in Wales and UK for crops and wildflowers. Bee and pollinator health and declining populations have been increasingly highlighted as a cause for concern in the UK and globally. And that concern was articulated in a motion presented to the 25th June Council by Councillor Stuart Ashley. Without intervention, this decline will continue. There's lots of strategies and legislation around this area, and just to name a few for you, Welsh Government published its action plan for pollinators in July last year, which highlighted the needs for a coordinated approach across all sectors. The Council's Local Biodiversity Action Plan provides a framework to coordinate and target activity to achieve biodiversity, ecosystem and wider sustainability gains. The Local Service Board has a biodiversity outcome indicator, and Welsh Government is in the process of introducing the Future Generations Bill, which will place a requirement upon us to provide evidence of how sustainable development is considered as part of our decision-making. The Council is already doing a lot in this area through a coordinated whole Council response, including colleagues from planning, asset management, parks, grounds maintenance, countryside and ecology teams, as well as external parties such as community councils, registered social landlords, allotment holders and developers, just to name a few. Some examples of activity already in place is the green roof that we have at the World Heritage Centre, the community orchards at Pontypool Park and Llanarafon, and the sowing of wildflower areas across the county borough, particularly along our cycle routes. As a major landowner, the Council can significantly influence opportunities for providing better conditions for pollinators, and in Section 6 of the report we set our proposals. The proposal is in a phased approach, and the first phase that we're recommending is to put in place a corridor of wildflowers from Cwmbran up to Blanavon. And many of you that travelled Malpas Road last summer would have seen the impact of what our colleagues in Newport have done in planting wildflowers. And I'm sure you'd agree, you know, it was a pleasure to see, and the impact on pollinators was quite significant. So what we are proposing, the same thing. The second area then is we've looked at grassland management, how we manage our grassland. Currently, we cut all of our grass every fortnight during the summer months. And what we're proposing under this recommendation is that we have identified areas of grassland across the county borough which will have a frequency of less intensive cutting. So we will essentially let areas grow for wild grassland. Those areas won't be cleansed as frequently as what we do currently. We are, currently, whenever we cut the grass every fortnight, we immediately cleanse the area on the same frequency. With these areas that we've identified to encourage wild grassland, we are recommending that cleansing would take place on a quarterly basis. And that has been on the recommendation of our ecologists in terms of getting the balance of encouraging wildlife activity in those areas. We will, of course, keep an eye on those areas and monitor them closely, because if cleansing does become a problem in those areas, we will have to intervene accordingly. The third area then is working with community groups and yourselves as ward members, is identifying areas in your localities with the community to plant wildflower seeding. Those areas would only take place if external funding was found. So we have no core budget in order to take those areas forward. So that would very much rely on working with third parties, yourselves as wards councillors, to take things through, working closely with the community and using external sources of funding. Section 6.5 of the report highlights other opportunities that we're already working on, but again we would focus more closely on, and they include working with developers to ensure design layouts maximise ecology opportunities, and again we're already doing a lot of work in that area with our colleagues in planning, using Section 106 and also SILS to fund and support pollinators, educate our maintenance staff, and there's a lot of that work that is already taking place, prepare a woodland strategy, and also undertake a holistic communication programme. Section 6.6 identifies areas where we could explore further if additional funding was sought, and that includes the purchase of new machinery, planting of orchards, etc., etc. The report also make reference to the Green Infrastructure Strategy, and I'd like to just say a few words around that. It's an innovative project which is being undertaken by officers across the Council, which seeks to gain a better understanding of our green infrastructure. Once completed, it will provide us with a strong evidence base to help us make better, more informative decisions, ensuring we make the most of our ecosystems. So in terms of financial implications with regard to the recommendations, the proposed way forward, because there will be some saving in cleansing regimes, which I've mentioned earlier in the grassland area, there will be an overall saving to my budget of £20,000. What I'm proposing to do with that funding is to hang on to it so that we are able to monitor those areas in the first instance, so that if further cleansing is required in those areas, we will use that funding to do that. Or otherwise, if it isn't needed, I would look to incorporate that into my overall budget saving measures for my 14-15 budget. So I mentioned earlier, Cabinet approved these proposals last week, but what I've made very clear to the Cabinet, and I'll do the same with you today, is that prior to any works commencing, I will arrange for officers to engage with you individually as elected members, so you fully understand what the work we've done to date, the areas that we have identified and proposing, and also to have a conversation with you around any other areas that you would like to take forward in your localities, because I'm sure there will be many. So just in conclusion, pollinators are an essential component of our environment and make a significant contribution to our economy. The proposals presented to you today seek to help prevent this further decline of pollinators across Torfaen, and I ask Council to note the proposed measures detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Members, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Ashley?
I said I would briefly answer this, and I warmly welcome the proposal, because it's, to be quite frank, exactly what I wanted when we put the proposal. I'd like to commend the leader for at the beginning of this of suggesting David is the sustainability champion. We've got somebody with a lot of energy here who'll go out and do this. And I'd like to thank the leader for being sustainability champion, because, you know, he's set the ground for this. But going on for these measures, I think whoever's written this, Christina sort of had a hand in it, but I know probably who's written this. And I personally have been on bodies with the people that have been involved with this, the Biodiversity Partnership and Torvine Environmental Partnership. And this is all the sort of thing that we've talked about for years, and I know the leader's been very keen on this sort of thing. The practical measures, because it is practical. This is about planting things. This is about the practical aspects of biodiversity with partners, with pollinators and global warming, because it does exist, whatever people think about it. And just looking at the rain now, and those pollinators out there are going to be suffering in this weather. I'm glad, and as somebody said on the internet, I'm glad we're not in Somerset. It's horrible over there. I think about the poor people over there. But the pollinators, the insects out there at the moment, are suffering because of this weather. There's no doubt about it. Some of the measures you're suggesting in here, like bee hotels, which really basically bundles of sticks, are going to and rough bits of land, are really going to be appreciative for what you're suggesting. I also went on Twitter the other day and Facebook suggesting to people that maybe the other aspect of this, which you've mentioned in here, is everybody's gardens. Leave some rough bits in there. You know, it's very, very important. The other aspect of this that made me smile, to be honest, was about you haven't got the machinery to do it. I got this image of council operatives going out with scythes, because that's what you mean, isn't it? It's a very good report. There's a lot in there, and we've got to find places to do things like community orchards and stuff like that. I mean, I in the past, when I was chair of community council, found a few £100 to put in orchards. It's an amazing number of apple trees you can buy for a few £100. In fact, the leader knows this one because he goes to various places and buys apple trees. We can all put in an apple tree or two in the garden, and you know, setting up a community orchard, if people have got small schemes of money there, got a little bit spare, then setting up a community orchard is rather easy. It's just the will of going and planting it. If you've got a bit of spare ground, I'm sure Christina can point you towards planting a few apple trees or other fruit trees, because it's very valuable. Thank you very much for the report, and I commend this.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I commend this report. As you know, Christine, I support it fully. It's an extensive report. You see, it's the biggest report we have today. I do have some reservations about some of the things in there, though. You did mention developers, working with the developers. As you know, the South Sebastopol site, we are destroying acre upon acre of prime meadow grassland. As you go past there, in the summer you'll see the grass swaying with all the pollinators in. We're going to destroy all that, we know that. That's the past history. But I hope you are working with the developers to replace some of that. And I don't think we're going to replace with all the grassland we're not going to cut with what's going on there. You've said you're working with community councils and community other support groups. There's no funding out there, as we know. But as you know, Hendless Community Council have been fighting for 3 years for an allotment now. We are willing to pay for an allotment to sustain the pollinators, to replace some of the ground we're losing in South Sebastopol. And it's just to let everybody know, and the general public, how slow this council has been working to get an allotment. It costs no cost to this borough whatsoever. The cost will be sustained by the community council. As of to date, we haven't got any further than the day one. So I hope there is some progression there, so we can fund an allotment to sustain the pollinators. As we know, when you go to see an allotment, I've been amazed by some of the allotments I've been to, and the leader, he's an allotment himself, and when you go there, the pollinators there, everything is in flower, thousands upon thousands of pollinators there. We want to be able to support that. And that's basically what I've got to say, but it's just, I will support this fully. As you know, we're looking at areas to plant wildflower seeds, but we must all, as a council, look at it, and as members, support you as well with external funding, because there's only one way forward, and that is without the bees, we don't exist, do we? But I do have some reservations. It's going to be hard work. It really is, I know that. And you've got a hard task in front of you. But I will, once again, emphasise, we as a Community Council Hentless want to have an allotment. You have the ground, as you said. We're a big landowner. There is land out there. And we have the chance to support the pollinators with your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, I fully support the pollination proposals as well. From day one, I think it's imperative that we do take on this policy. But likewise, I have some concerns as well, especially in relation to the corridors. I mean, the corridors are strewn with litter. Now, as I speak, as I drove down this morning, the corridors into Blenavon are strewn with litter. If we are intending to do biodiversity in the corridors, as is mentioned in the report, this will only highlight the problem with the litter. That's one concern I have. I'm glad to hear you say, Christina, that you'll be working with local environmental groups, community council and ward members. I think it's imperative. I think we should also publicise as much as we can to the communities as well, because they need to be on board with this, and I'm sure you have got that in place. The last thing I wanted to know was, you mentioned monitoring the situations in respective areas, Christina. If you monitor the situations in an area and you find that it's not working, what are your plans then?
Thank you. Yes, in terms just picking up the answer. Your last question really is that so we will monitor it through my officers. As you know, they are out and about daily, but also we'll be working with yourselves and relying upon yourselves as well, because we work very closely with you. You will provide that feedback to us. And in terms of what we'll do about it, it's very much we're going to have to look at it on an individual basis, working with yourselves, seeking the advice from the ecologists, and also finding a way forward. And that may take a number of routes. It may be that we have to just increase litter frequency, we may need to do some enforcement, or ultimately we may need to look at an alternative site. You know, it is very much, we are learning as we go along. This is new for us. We've done a lot of research with our colleagues, particularly in Newport, to learn from, their experiences. But on balance, we have to do something, and it's not going to be perfect on first time round, but it's very much working together. We can make it happen. And so with regards to the litter, we'll keep an eye on it through my own resources, but also relying on feedback from yourselves as well.
Can I just come back briefly, Madam Mayor? I hear you saying about if there's a situation where you'd have to do more litter picking, but isn't that going away from the theme of possibly trying to save money?
Well, it's not about saving money here. The main emphasis is about on increasing the opportunities for our pollinators. It just happens to give us an opportunity to reduce cleansing frequencies as well. But the main driver isn't about saving money. If we have, I did say that it does provide us with a saving opportunity of £20,000, and I will hang on to that so I can use that if I need to actually increase litter cleansing in these areas.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burnett? Mary Barnett, sorry.
Sorry, I thought you were bringing in our representative from Hentless Community Council again. Thank you for the report. I think it's absolutely superb, and like many people here, I've been a supporter of biodiversity and protecting our planet for many, many years. I just want to make 2 points. One is I obviously applaud the fact that you are going to consult with local councillors and residents and organisations. And I'm sure you'd be very welcome, particularly in Thornhill, which encompasses 2 wards, because we have some amazing examples of what has happened there, in particular with the community park. And I will pay full tribute to our former Chief Officer, Bill Hill, and his band of volunteers who've worked now for months and months to turn that into a very biodiverse area. The point I also want to make is we all have recognised what a joy it was to drive through Malpas, in particular in Newport, and see the wildflower seeding. I note under 6.4 you do mention that the intention is to extend our schemes, but there is a financial aspect. Could I remind you that, members, that many of our roundabouts are actually in a prime condition because of the work of the former councillor and mayor, the late David Lloyd, who brought in a scheme of sponsorship. Could I ask if consideration has been given to asking for sponsorship in a similar vein for wildflower seeding on certain areas?
Yes, the answer is yes. Certainly with the spine the corridor running up through the borough, we certainly feel encouraged that we should be able to get that sponsored. And also with our existing sponsored roundabouts, we will be looking to try and increase the biodiversity opportunities for those as well. So yes, we will be looking to sponsor as much as we can throughout the borough.
Councillor Glyn Karen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One point I would like to make, especially to my colleagues here today, and one question I'd like to ask. I'll make the point first, and it's actually in the report on page 95. Leaving areas to develop into meadowland could take several years to develop and may be unsightly until it provides biodiversity value. It's just, I think, something that colleagues here, we all applaud this. But if we get a few people on the phone saying, "Oh, you haven't cut the grass over there," we need to be very conscious of exactly what we're doing here. And it's no good ringing officers after 6 months and say, "Oh, I don't want that meadowland there." We have to accept what we're doing now and go with it. And my question is, it's still on page 95. And it's sort of in my area, if not exactly in my ward. Extending the existing local nature reserves was considered, but dog control orders make this difficult. I've had a little look at what it says really on the internet about local nature reserves, section 21 of the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act of 1949. So I'm a bit confused as to why our dog control orders are in conflict with that. Perhaps a difficult one to come up with right here and now, but I'd appreciate a view on that if I could have one.
Yes, I don't have the answer now, but I know an officer who does, so I'll put that officer in touch with you.
Councillor Neil Waite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just been looking through the list, and with Cummin Skye has a nature reserve, which could be potentially a beautiful area. We've got a local CCAT committee of local people that we have over the last couple of years had a plan of planting flowers, planting daffodils, planting a new area of Cummin Skye. I think this would be an ideal situation to for the nature reserve to be, if we can get some flower planting in there, it'd be absolutely wonderful, I think. Thank you.
Councillor Colette Thomas.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to refer to page 97, where there's a reference to the Vartig Cemetery and planting of the wildflower mix on the verges to the entrance of the cemetery. I'm just wondering whether we could have a look at the cemetery in Llywyn Celyn in Hollybush, and we could do the same project there, please.
Councillor Stuart Ashley.
I was going to mention, obviously, my role as chair of allotments, that one of the other aspects that's mentioned in here is the allotments have actually been very successful. Certainly the allotment committee have been very successful at the Welsh Show the last couple of years, and they've got quite a considerable amount of expertise at growing show gardens and doing the sort of thing that you kind of need. And they are quite into a lot of this, so I think we need to draw their expertise on this sort of thing. And you mentioned it in here, which is good. But they are working with schools at the moment, so there's a lot of, I think, a lot of goodwill voluntarily around the place. The sort of thing that the Mon and Breck people are doing as well with groups, I think we could build quite a considerable amount on this. The other thing which would delight you, I think, is a lot of this stuff can be done at fairly low cost, but there is a cost. But the cost is developing the expertise in the community, which is pretty. Once we got it there, that people develop those skills, they can also go on and develop skills setting up their own businesses, which I think is you know, or businesses or interests, which is where we should be going with this stuff. It's not just about doing it for the environment, it's social capital as well. And there's a very good article in The Guardian the other day about small jobs that people can, you know, and the more of these sort of things we can do, which can lead to environmental jobs, because people say, oh, what can you do when I'm retired, or when, you know, I think there's a lot in that.
Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In your question, Christina, you've said about educating staff. It's just a situation that arose last year. It wasn't our staff, it was actually Bronavon staff. Some very upset residents. They were cutting all the shrubbery, because they do the shrubbery apparently now, don't they? And they were cutting the shrubbery in August, when the shrubbery hadn't even come into flower. And they were very upset. And when I seen the guys who were doing it, they've decided they were doing one, they will do them all at the same time. We would be working with Bronavon and educating everybody's staff, and what qualifications do some of these people have and know about shrubberies or even gardening? So could we liaise with them and actually decide who's going to be doing what and at what time?
Yes, we already work closely with Bronavon, and Bronavon already do a lot of biodiversity activity themselves. And under this proposal, yes, that relationship will continue. We've already had dialogue with them. They're aware and supportive of this proposal. So yes, we will work closely with them. But I understand the situation that you've mentioned, and I can't guarantee, even with all the training, that that is not going to happen again. But hopefully, it will be minimised.
David Daniels.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of the proposal, actually, but following on from what Glyn said and Councillor Burnett as well, it seems like there's room for possible confusion amongst the public, and I wonder what sort of measures we're taking to properly articulate the objectives that we've got with the public, and what sort of education we'll be undertaking to really sort of set it in stone.
Yes, we will have a comprehensive communication plan. So communicating is one thing. You know, we need to communicate the message, what we are trying to achieve, you know, both globally and also locally. So again, it's about educating yourselves with all the information as well, so that if you get any complaints or any requests, you're able to articulate what we're doing back. And in terms of engagement and education, you know, there's a lot of work that we're already doing with various groups, and we will continue to do that going forward. But it's very much a slow burn exercise, which, you know, many members have mentioned. It's not going to turn around overnight. It's very much building year on year, and the communication strategy will actually tie in with that.
Councillor Haynes.
Thank you. The report says the main areas of concern for pollinators are land use intensification, habitat destruction and fragmentation. Now, I wholeheartedly support the report recommendation, but I do wish that there'd been better consideration of the use of green spaces when determining planning applications and housing sites for the LDP. I'm hoping that our new sustainability champion, because he has been quite verbal in this in the past, and all power to him, that he picks up and helps with the correlation between sustainability and planning.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'll be very quick, because we've been on this subject a while now. I endorse the report and the recommendations, but just a very quick point I want to make. On page 95, within my ward, there's an area, Barnfield has been identified for planting of wildflowers and the margins. But it's also there noted that there's an issue of JK along the bank. Now, I'm assuming JK is Japanese knotweed, and what I was looking to get was a level of assurance that both within my ward and throughout the borough, not only would we focus on the planting of the wildflowers and encouraging the meadows, but we would have the continued treatment of the Japanese knotweed to try and manage this problem. Thank you.
Yes, the resources that we currently deploy on Japanese knotweed treatment remain as such, and we would look to coordinate that treatment with the areas that we are proposing here as well. But again, it's about working with you closely. You have the list, but there needs to be conversations with you around what we've identified and also what you would like to see in your ward areas. So I'm quite happy to pick these conversations up with you, my officers individually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Crick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. If I could ask, and this is one of those occasions where, obviously, when it comes to pollinators, they're very important with this, and it's the brambles. I noticed across Caerleog and Llanaraf, and there's nothing other than Logan Way which really comes up here. But we have a tremendous growth of brambles which cause problems with pedestrians. If you're going to plant wildflowers, that's great, but you've also got to control the bramble growth. We can report, and it can be weeks sometimes, by which time the brambles are across the paths before anything is done. So I hope that this will still be taken into consideration, because it is a problem for pedestrians, particularly in areas where there are many elderly people. Thank you.
Okay, we've got 3 more and then we're going to move on, all right? So, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. It's just on page 95, under Other. It says about the metre strip, where we can get away with it. I'm just wondering sort of what precisely is meant by that.
That's a technical term. No, that's very much when considering health and safety implications, and obviously how we manage health and safety in our operations. So again, a conversation to have with you locally in terms of what that actually means.
Councillor Wellington.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We've spent more time, by the way, on this than we have on the budget. Not that it's not important. Obviously, members feel that this, and I'm glad that they feel like that they're passionate about it. I want to congratulate, I think we should move on now. I want to congratulate Stuart Ashley, who was the person who brought it. Well done, Stuart. And I'm sure Stuart will work closely with David Daniels to ensure that all our aspirations is met. We move on.
Right, we've got last one. Councillor Evans, the last one, and then we're going to move on.
Thank you, Deputy Madam Mayor. What I wanted to know, Christina, when are you intending to carry out these plantings? And when, obviously, more important again, is when are you going to meet with the respective environmental groups, community councils, ward members? There's quite a lot of consultation to be taking place. So can you give us some indication of when you're going to do this?
It will all be phased because, like you say, there's a lot of work to do. So, we'll phase it and incorporate it into our general work programme. But where we're looking to start is on the wildflower corridor, and we'll be looking to start planting in the next couple of weeks. So, because we need to start planting now in readiness for the summer. So, but we'll be doing a lot of communication before we start any activity on site, so people understand what it is we're doing, and that communication will be ongoing as the flowers start to blossom. Whilst that actually happens, then we will start having conversations with yourselves around what we are looking to do in the local areas. And also as we start to cut grass, but in March we are hopeful that we will have those areas identified and confirmed with yourselves around what areas of grassland that we are going to leave to encourage biodiversity.
Just very, very briefly, Madam Mayor. Why I mention this, as has been mentioned by my colleagues before, there's quite a few areas that have been planted up by environmental groups with daffodils and all kinds of flowers, so there needs to be a lot of consultation.
Okay, the recommendations on page 90 of the agenda. We are asked to note the proposed measures to increase the number of pollinating insects in Torfaen. Are we all agreed? Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, that's unanimous and agreed. Thank you. Move on to agenda item 14, School Crossing Patrols Petition. Christina Harry, Chief Officer, Neighbourhood Services. Can you present your report, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. The purpose of this report is to inform members of 2 petitions which have been received on the subject of the review of the school crossing patrol service, and also to inform members of the action taken as a result and the conclusions of the executive member and myself as Chief Officer. A petition was presented to the Executive Member for Neighbourhood Services on the 2nd of December, signed by 76 persons. A further petition was presented to the Executive Member for Neighbourhood Services by Councillor Colette Thomas on the 6th of January this year, signed by 1,763 persons. Both petitions were headed, "This is a petition objecting to the proposal by the Council to cut funding for school crossing patrols outside schools across the borough," and within the larger petition, some sheets referred specifically to a petition to save our lollipop crossers at Nantkelin School. You will recall that the proposals to deliver a balanced budget for the financial year 14-15 included the review of the school crossing patrol service to ensure the service we provide is in accordance with current national guidelines, which are detailed within the School Crossing Patrol Service Guidelines November 2013, produced by Road Safety Great Britain. Whilst an indication of the potential savings has been made within the budget proposals to date, this indication is subject to the outcome of the review. So as such, no specific sites have been identified at this stage and will only be known after the review is completed. After the review is completed, it will be presented to the Scrutiny Committee, Cleaner Scrutiny Committee, for consideration and wider member consultation before an executive member decision is taken regarding the implementation of the outcome of the review. So as such, both myself and the executive member have considered both petitions presented to us, and we are minded to continue with the review and also present the review, the outcome of the review, in the way that I've already outlined. And we've advised the lead petitioners accordingly. Thank you.
Members, do you have any comments or questions? Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I mean, not on obviously the receipt of the petitions, but I note in 5.4, for example, you say where schools do not meet the criteria, they might wish to fund schemes themselves and you'll offer them support. I want to ask the legal background for this. If there was a very serious accident arising during a school crossing patrol issue, who would bear the legal costs and whose insurance then would be affected? Would it be the school's insurance or would it be the council's insurance? Because it would be, I assume, the council's insurance at the moment.
That's something that we would... I don't know whether, Linda, you've got anything to add, but that's something we haven't explored.
I think that would very much depend on what exactly the accident was and the reasons for it. So I don't think we'd be able to say one thing or the other in relation to that. I think that would be a matter for the insurance. I don't think I can give any more information rather than that.
I have concerns because if it might have been a faulty decision on the part, say, of the school crossing patrol officer, who are great, but, you know, they have very challenging situations to deal with sometimes, and there is obviously a very serious accident where the motorists perhaps are not culpable, but the crossing patrol officer could be, then, you know, this could be a crippling expense if schools had to look at their insurance to deal with any claims that might be made. Hopefully that will never happen. At the moment, of course, it would be the council, I assume, that would meet those claims.
I don't think I can really give you much more of an informed opinion on that, really. I think we'd have to look through the employment issue, exactly what was happening, all the circumstances of it, really. But I can note your concern in establishing what the responsibilities are between the council and or the employing body, be they the school. And I think that's something for the insurance section, and it might be that that we actually get the insurance section to give a more informed view by email to members.
That might affect, obviously, whether the school wishes to take up the offer to fund the scheme themselves.
Okay, the recommendations on page 103 of the agenda. We're we are asked to note the petitions, the action taken and the response. Are we all agreed? Show of hands, please. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Right, that's agreed. Thank you. Next agenda, item 15, webcasting in Torvine. Richard Edmonds, Head of Strategic and Democratic Services. Can you present the report, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Good afternoon, members. You'll be aware that we've been webcasting since October. Seems a long time back now, I'm sure. During this time, meetings of Council, Cabinet, as well as 2 member seminars have been broadcast to the public. We've also taken the opportunity behind the scenes to test the issues associated with broadcasting differing committee types, and that's provided invaluable learning. You'll see from the report that on average, every webcast receives around 1,000 views, either during the meeting or via the archive thereafter. This is a really healthy number of views, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank members and officers for what I've classed as your willing participation thus far. Feedback from far and wide to date has been largely positive. I think on that note it's worth picking up the points that the leader raised earlier, and thank you for your continued support, Bob, in helping us to resolve these issues. Not everything has run smoothly. In recent meetings there have been a number of what we class as technical difficulties. These problems have largely related to whether everything that is recorded in the meeting within this chamber is being broadcast publicly. There have been examples of the broadcast jumping, which I'm sure you'll appreciate is frustrating. The issue itself remains under investigation currently, but as the leader has stated, we do record everything in full locally from the system in the corner, and we now intend to make this local recording available to all members upon the conclusion of every meeting via the members' common drive. So you will all be able to see a full recording within a matter of minutes of the end of each meeting that's webcast. I'll circulate an explanatory note to all members that outlines all of the issues that we've been dealing with, many of which have now largely been put to bed. Switching back to the main aspects of the report, in December 2013, as part of the Democratic Services Committee's work programme, I was asked to present a report on webcasting progress. The intention was to assess how far we'd come and also to establish whether the list of meetings that we were currently webcasting should be extended. I think it's fair to say the issue was debated fully at the committee. Paragraph 5.5 of the report before you sets out a summary of the views that the committee shared with us on that day. In essence, they would like Council to endorse the continuation of existing arrangements and also to agree to add the ability for us to webcast any scrutiny meetings deemed to be of sufficient public interest. This largely forms the recommendations that are now put to Council for consideration, and I'll leave it there. Happy to take any question. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, do you have any questions or comments?
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor, and thanks, Ed, for the report. Obviously, I've got a vested interest in this for originally bringing it to Council. And I'd just like to comment, really, that the figures are really good. You know, we couldn't get 1,000 people up in the gallery, you know, no matter how much we might want to. And speaking to people who have seen it online, I mean, whilst it's not the most exciting viewing they've ever had, what it has done is really demystified the whole process. And I think if we do go further and broadcast other types of meetings, similarly it'll demystify those. For example, there's a mention here of possibly doing a planning meeting, which, you know, I find that most people seem to find planning regulations as clear as mud. You know, anything that can help people understand, you know, the regulations surrounding it, which may help them when they make their own proposals, I think is really positive. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Ashley?
Yes, as much as I don't like looking at myself on it, having looked at it, look like a big blob on it, but no, it's certainly something that people can see what you're up to and what you're saying and all that. The other thing I was impressed with, and I went with some other councillors to the All Wales scrutiny meeting, and some of it was okay and some of it wasn't. The one thing that they said, workshop I went to there was on digital counselling, and the one aspect they suggested there, which I wholeheartedly suggest, is the televised, the webcasting of scrutiny meetings, because I think it's an area that we need to do, because that's the area which is most mysterious to out there, as it were. And I think scrutiny does need to be a process that they understand, because when I mention what scrutiny is about, people say, what's that? But if they can see what it is, and we can see what other councils are doing in terms of scrutiny, digital counselling for what it is, we need to be putting that out and say, this is a scrutiny process and how robust we hopefully are on it. I think it's important. I hope other members do as well.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think it's been a very good experience for the residents of Torvine, and the figures prove that. I'm glad to see that they mention in the report that we can continue to webcast seminars that are of public interest. I think that's a very, very good thing. What I would like to ask you, Richard, is how would we decide those seminars that were of special interest? Would that come back to Council at some stage, or how would that delegated decision be arrived at?
If you're talking about members' seminars specifically, that was a decision that Council took back in September, and the delegated powers were given to myself in consultation with the leader to determine which seminars would be broadcast publicly.
Okay, members, the recommendations are on page 109 of the agenda. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Smith, sorry.
Not at all, Madam Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to say that one of the great benefits, I think, of this system is the way that some of the seminars are webcast, because for many members, such as myself, who find it very difficult to get to seminars for work reasons, it is extremely beneficial to be able to sit at home in the comfort of my armchair and enjoy the seminar under those circumstances. So it does actually help we members make sure we're as informed as possible, which is very beneficial. In terms of the scope of meetings broadcast, well, council meetings are public forums. I'd broadcast them all. I'd be perfectly happy with that, because what we say, we're saying in a public space, with the exception of exempt items. So what can possibly be wrong with that?
Okay, right. The recommendations are on page 109 of the agenda. Richard Edmonds, would you like to outline the recommendations?
Well, excuse me, I will, Chair. It's that Council agrees to the webcasting of ONS committee meetings deemed to be of sufficient public interest, delegates the decision over which ONS committee meetings to webcast to the chairs of the ONS committees in consultation with myself and in liaison with the leader, asks the Head of Strategic and Democratic Services to explore with relevant committee chairs in the spring of 2014 the possibility of webcasting appropriate other meetings, and asks for further reports on progress from myself to the Democratic Services Committee and to the Council in the autumn of 2014.
Okay, thank you. Are we all agreed? Can I have a show of hands, please? All those for? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Okay, that's agreed. Agenda item 16, cap on member indemnities. Linda Willis, Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer, can you present your report, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is a short report, but it has an important principle. Regulations set out how councils may offer indemnities to members and officers in order to protect them when they have an individual case brought against them when they're carrying out their duties. As the report highlights, there have been particular difficulties elsewhere in relation to costs given under an indemnity involving code of conduct complaints against members. Now, this council has never had an application by a member for an indemnity in relation to pursuing a defence against a code of conduct complaint. If that had been the case, the arrangements, as you'll see from the indemnity, are that it goes to the Standards Committee in its first instance, and they will determine, depending on the nature of the case, what a proportionate amount would be. But technically, there's no limit to what that indemnity may be. And again, you'll see there's been concern from the Ombudsman, from the Welsh Local Government Association and the adjudication panel at some cases which have run up extensive costs. Nevertheless, they think it's still important that a set amount, an appropriate amount is available, because if a member is defending a complaint, it does affect that member's reputation, etc. You'll see that a cap of £20,000 is actually proposed, and that is actually what is suggested that we add to our current set of indemnity. You'll also note that your own Ethics and Standards Committee has actually approved that. If I can just read out the recommendations, you'll see that you will agree that, as before, the Ethics and Standards Committee considers each application for a costs indemnity and decides whether an indemnity should be given, and that if an indemnity is given for code of conduct proceedings, that the committee decides on the amount of the indemnity, but it's up to a maximum of £20,000 per case, and that we actually amend the form of indemnity if you agree the above. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Councillor Barnett?
Yes, as Members Champion, I do go to various joint meetings with other Members Champions, and, you know, the issue of Code of Conduct complaints does cause concern, especially in some authorities where there's almost a culture of doing it without perhaps looking too, closely on the part of the person making the complaint, whether in fact it's justified or not. I would wholeheartedly support the recommendations, but I have one sort of area that concerns me a little bit, and that is 10.2, that the Standards and Ethics Committee should decide on the amount of that indemnity up to a maximum of 20,000. And I would like, obviously, for that particular committee to discuss at some length, and we have members here, what kind of approach they're going to use to do any kind of demarcation, because I'm very well aware that some people, by the nature of their portfolio, might be more open to accusations of code of conduct than others, and could be getting them quite regularly, etc., which can, mount up. Also, as you know, we have no payment of costs against the complainant if found unfounded, unlike civic actions for libel and slander, etc. So once again, my question is directed to what criteria the Standards and Ethics would use to demarcate the different levels of support that they would think appropriate for different cases.
I think that would very much depend on the circumstances of the case, the nature of the allegation that was brought, as you say, the reputational risk, etc. So I think they can't set down those criteria, but you'll know that the committee has to have a majority of independent members. They are there to promote ethical standards, and they will apply a fair and sensible application on the facts before them.
Okay. Councillor Cunningham?
Yeah, just a comment to make. I think that some members will know, anyway, in the last council, prior to this one, we were actually top of the pops in referrals for Code of Conduct complaints. We topped all the league figures, I understand. But we've been very fortunate that all those members who had complaints taken against them never felt the need to defend the case, because we felt that it would, through the normal process of things, they would be clear. And they were. Everybody was, I think. But there has been members here in the past, and hopefully it doesn't happen again, who've been subject to continuous vexatious complaints against them through the Ombudsman, etc. And as I said, with no foundation at all. But those complaints always have some certain implications on the character of that individual, because it is publicised after the Ombudsman has made his decision, whether it's founded or unfounded, it's always publicised anyway. A lot of people will say, oh, no smoke without fire anyway. If they're complaining being made against you, there's always something there, which isn't true. And I completely agree with what Mary said. There is never any course for action against these individuals who make these vexation complaints. Once the determination has been made by the Ombudsman that they are unfounded, they just walk away and they look now for the next thing to complain about. So I think we really ought to know whether there is any avenue for individuals of councils to take action against these people who continually make vexatious complaints against elected members, purely very often for political purposes.
If members of the public feel they have a complaint, then you'll know they go to the Ombudsman, and it is for the Ombudsman, obviously, to filter out whether there is any substance to that complaint or whether it is vexatious. So if it is vexatious, it should not proceed. But other than that, there is no action that the Council would support individually against the complainant. And you can see the terms of the indemnity are such that it doesn't allow members to initiate any action for defamation, etc. So those are the regulations as set out. Councillor Cunningham.
Councillor Wellington.
Yeah, I support the recommendations, and it's WLGA is taking this now through all councils. But I need to just ask the monitoring officer a question, because my understanding where this whole issue came from, and I'd best not mention names, but where this whole issue came from was that there was a case in Wales, not necessarily of a councillor, but there was a case and they run up a cost of, I think it was £100,000. Now, in that instance, it was, as I said, not a member. I think you ought to bring back a report to tell us what the implications are, not of this, but what are the implications if officers find themselves in a situation where they have to defend themselves, and what sort of cost that would be to the council, and just offer an opinion on that. Because this originated out of something not to do with members, but to do with officers.
I think, Leader, the concern that has come in Wales, which has resulted in the WLGA and the other Welsh, the Ombudsman, etc., putting that forward, is in relation to cases elsewhere, I think in North and West Wales, where in one the adjudication panel has sat for 60 days and they've heard 100 witnesses, which they feel is disproportionate, and that, as the report sets out, a fair level would be £20,000. I think you may be thinking separately. Now, this is about code of conduct proceedings. I think you're thinking separately about defamation. The form of indemnity that is attached to this report also refers to officers and members and is more extensive around there. And there is no indemnity in relation to initiating an action for defamation. Not under the indemnity. I think the case you may be thinking about, which was brought, they had to have a special council decision to support that. So that was a very particular case, I think, quite extreme, and it's hoped. I don't think that most councils
and I think I accept the report completely, and I think that if there's a case similar to that, that you would have to bring it back to council to get agreement to pursue. Not with members, but with officers.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Anything outside the indemnity would have to be a specific council decision. Yeah.
Okay. Linda's already outlined the recommendations, which are on page 112 of the agenda. Are we all agreed? Show of hands, please. Yeah. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Right, that's agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 17, Standards Committee members. Linda Willis, Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer, can you present this report as well, please?
Thank you again. The Ethics and Standards Committee is a committee that the Council must establish, and it must have a majority of independent members. This Council will remember that you set up an interview panel to go through an appropriate process to replace two retiring members. And we were fortunate enough to have a very strong field of candidates, and the proposal from that panel is that you appoint Mr John Irvine and Mrs Catherine Peggington to be new members for 4 years. And because it was such a strong field, they're able also to suggest that you consider appointing a reserve, Mr Andrew Walsh. That reserve will be able to take over from the next retiring member in about a year's time. It will still be subject to a further report to Council to confirm that. So I'm very pleased that we had such strong candidates. There's important work to be done, and that we have 2 very good candidates to replace the 2 retiring members. Thank you.
Members, any questions, comments? No? I'm sorry. Leader?
Yeah, I move the recommendations, Madam Mayor. The Council has been asked to approve the appointment of 2 new independent members, but can I take this opportunity to thank the 2 retiring members, Roger Chater and Tony Cruss, for all their work. They've been members of that committee for 8 years, serving as Chair and Vice Chair for most of that time. They've been committed to helping members understand and apply the Code of Conduct, and they've done a good job of that, I think. In particular, they worked with all members to produce a local protocol dealing with complaints, which was one of the first in Wales. The Ombudsman and the Welsh ministers are now encouraging all councils to adopt something similar. So we were cutting new ground in that sense. I'm sure all members will want to acknowledge their appreciation and thanks for their services in helping members maintain high standards of conduct. I move the recommendation.
Thank you, Leader. Recommendations on page 118 of the agenda. We are asked to agree to appoint 2 new committee members and keep a further person in reserve. Are we all agreed? Show of hands, please. All agreed. Thank you. Move on to agenda item 18, committee memberships. Richard Grinnell, Lead Officer, Council and Member Support. Can you present this report, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. It's a very brief report seeking Council's approval to fill vacancies on committees and other bodies internally. If you look at paragraph 3.1, members, nominations have been received to fill those vacancies, 3 of them. On the Healthier Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Nigel Davis. On the Appointments Committee, Councillor Mary Barnett. And on the Members' Constitution Working Party, Councillor Stuart Ashley. Council is asked to agree those appointments in line with political balance, and also Council is asked to decide whether it wants to fill the vacancy which still exists on the corporate parenting panel.
Members, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Hunt.
Move the recommendation.
I'd like to move in addition to the report that Councillor Nigel Davis replaces Councillor Jess Powell on learning communities, as Jess is now our designated member for the EAS.
Move that.
Okay. Seconder? All right. Can we have a vote on the amended? All those in favour? Okay, unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 19, outside body updates. Richard Grinnell, Lead Officer, Council and Member Support. Can you present this report as well, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. An even briefer report from me, members. The Council nominates people to outside bodies, as everybody knows, and last did so in May at its annual general meeting. During the year, we have updates for whatever reason, and the updates are listed in paragraph 3.4. Councillor Richard Clark is going on to the Care and Repair Torvine Steering Committee. Councillor Nigel Davis onto the Crossy Keeliog Joint Users Committee. Councillor Richard Clark on Domestic Abuse Forum. Councillor Veronica Crick has been nominated to serve on Bronavon instead of Councillor Kelvin Harnett. And the Coed Eva and Hollybush Community Association has changed its status, so they no longer need a representative from the Council. And it's for information, members. The decisions are made by the Leader and Chief Executive, so the updates are reported for information.
Members, any questions, comments? No. The recommendation is on page 122 of the agenda. We are asked to note the updates. Are we all agreed? Show of hands, please. Yeah. Unanimous. Okay, thank you, members. That's agreed. Agenda item 20, motions. Councillor Barnett, your motion is on page 123. Can you move it and speak to it now, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. And because of the solemn nature of the subject, I will stand for my presentation. My motion is that yesterday, the 27th of January, National Holocaust Day, was marked throughout the United Kingdom. We in Torfaen have made efforts to ensure we do not forget the horrors of Holocaust and that succeeding generations are aware of the dangers of not recognising cultural, religious, ethnic and other differences. Over the years, working with Torfaen Sacre, churches, schools and other groups, we've held the Snowdrop services, Journey to Hope, Peace Rose presentations and took the lead last year in Wales with our exhibitions and concerts. This year a very moving service was held at St Cadoc's Church involving local schools to which the Mayor invited all councillors. A lasting memorial to victims of oppression is the chilling painting produced by two Torfaen artists which hangs above the entrance to our council chamber. However, it is not enough solely to remember the horrors of the past. We must all work towards ensuring that they are not repeated. Sadly, current international and national news indicate that the lessons have not been learned by all. I call on all political leaders of Torfaen County Borough Council to pledge support for future National Holocaust commemorations and to do all that they can to ensure we continue to celebrate cultural diversity in Torfaen by A, continuing to educate succeeding generations in the horrors of the Holocaust, B, recognising that few nations are innocent of having a history of persecuting minority groups, C, supporting the work of Wales United Against Fascism and its recently formed Gwent group, and D, continuing to celebrate diversity. I hope all council colleagues will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Is the motion seconded? Members, do you want to debate this?
Can I have a recorded vote, Madam Chairman?
Does anybody want to debate it? Right, so there will be a recorded vote. Would you like to debate it? Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I fully support the initial part, which is to pledge support for future National Holocaust commemorations. However, A, B, C and D, I would like perhaps to amend the motion and remove the letter C. And the reasons I would remove that is I'm quite horrified to find that members are here present declared an interest that they're members of an extreme left group called Unite Against Fascism. And I think leaders need to be mindful and to do a bit more research or abstain before they vote on this, because Unite Against Fascism are a violent group. They're on the internet, you can see that, and there is allegations that they were responsible for decimating the memorial of Lee Rigby, the soldier that was killed in Woolwich. So to be associated with a far left extreme violent group, I would ask to remove the letter C and then go ahead with the motion.
Is that seconded? Sorry, who seconded it? Okay, I'm sorry, that falls away. Councillor Rees.
Well, I'm very glad that motion fell. I just want to pledge Plaid Cymru support for Mary's motion, and A, B and C and D. Thank you.
Before you put, I think everybody has a right to make a comment now, and I don't want to go into a long diatribe about what's going on and what isn't going on. But I think if the people in Torvine want to understand the arguments around fascism and the arguments around those people that are putting them forward and not putting them forward, there's sufficient websites in Torvine, and if you read those websites, you'll soon see who is advocating violence and who isn't advocating violence.
Thank you. Councillor Daniels?
I was more or less going to say the same thing to affect what Bob's just said, really. If we're going to look to a group that's accused of violence and inciting hatred, look to the EDL, of which members in this council have expressed support for. So I think that speaks volumes.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley?
I went to the service yesterday, and up on that moving slideshow came yesterday was a young man that was detained in a leisure centre, not unlike the one we've got down there in Sarajevo. I can never say that word very well. And after the event that we had 2 years ago, my daughter, who was like those young people there, who was at the time 16, was playing that music, that haunting music from the anti-Nazi thing. I can never remember the name. Schindler's List. Thank you very much. She worked very hard like those young people that did yesterday to present that piece of music. We spent some time talking to a young man who was the Muslim gentleman from Bosnia that lived in London, witnessing all this. And the conversation we had was probably one of the most moving. I'm seeing my emotion at the moment. Was one of the most moving conversations I've ever had with somebody. He was a young man, very normal young man. I'm sure some people here spoke to him as well. And just to witness that this stuff is happening in our time, that my daughter, who's now 17, was probably something that affected her, and that young people in this county talk to people like that, and that is the most important thing we must remember in this debate, that this must not happen again. Now, I've met some, in my lifetime, I'm sure we have all met survivors of the Holocaust in Belsen and places like that, and I really feel that we must not make this let this happen, but unfortunately it does. And it's happening all the time, and we must witness to the fact that it should not happen. I support Mary's motion wholeheartedly, and it must not make this descend to silliness, please. It's such an important issue. And remember, people fought wars over this, please. I support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Ashley. Anybody else? Councillor Powell?
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to comment as well that I fully support this motion. In a previous life, I used to work for a youth charity, and we worked especially with young refugees in Newport, and also in Torvine we have similar communities. And I think it really brings home that, this is happening internationally, but it's also happening in the UK. Even in Torvine, we have examples of racist violence. We have members of far-right groups. We have people who openly support violence against people based on nothing more than their external appearance in some cases. And I really think that as a council we should do everything we can to promote tolerance and understanding. The world needs people of different opinions, different religions, different creeds. We can't all be the same, and we shouldn't want to be. So, thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I join other members in voicing my support for commemoration of the Holocaust. Sadly, we live in a world where you only have to turn the TV news on to find the almost unending capacity that humanity seems to have for devising new ways of inflicting cruelty and suffering on each other, which is tremendously sad. I think toleration is an extraordinarily important thing. And And we're very lucky to live in this country where one of the things that we have is a history and culture of toleration. And that includes toleration of free speech. I think it was Jean-Jacques Rousseau who said that I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend your right to say it with my life. There are some subjects of public debate that should rightly be public debate. If you believe opinion polls, the third most popular political party in this country is a populist party, and part of their popular appeal is that a section of the community feels that their policies speak to their concerns. That is a legitimate subject for public debate, and it should be tested at the ballot box. That's how we do things in this country. Please don't be in any doubt, I utterly condemn totalitarianism and totalitarian organisations from wherever they take their inspiration. I think that is the great evil that we've always encountered. We fought wars against totalitarianism, and we should oppose its ideas, however they shroud themselves, however they disguise themselves. We should be tolerant and open and respectful of other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett, would you like to come back in?
Yes, I would, Madam Mayor. Deputy Mayor, very, very quickly. I thank those leaders of political groups, Councillor Smith and Councillor Rees, and the leader who have spoken. I don't know whether Councillor Haynes would like to make a comment for the record.
Thank you very much. Fully support the motion. I'm sorry I wasn't in the room when you actually read your motion.
That's why I said it,
thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Yes, fully support the motion all the way.
Could I just say in conclusion, the reason that I have quite a lengthy motion is that I'm very, very concerned that succeeding generations do not see genocide as belonging to the 1940s solely and arising out of Nazi Germany. History and current events show us that very few nations have not tried genocide or persecution of minority groups. As you're aware, England has the unsavoury reputation of forming the first concentration camp in the Boer War. You have to look at the Americans and the massacre of Plains Indians, Australians with the Aborigines, and then all the current events that we've had since. It's not solely a problem that is on the library shelves dealing with Nazi Germany. And I have to say that the first people who died in the concentration camps and the extermination camps were Germans, trade unionists, religious leaders and political opponents, etc. So I wouldn't like a whole nation to be condemned for being solely responsible for inventing genocide. That is not so. I'm encouraged by the remarks that members have made. Certainly it's a subject that I feel very strongly about, partly because my whole future changed because of the Second World War, born as a war baby in the closing years of the war. I would like to reassure Councillor Harris that the United Against Fascism group was formed to deal with a load of issues like this, and the reason I went along to the first meeting to form a Gwent branch was because people were increasingly concerned about cyberbullying for those who were supporting minority groups, whether it was to do with religion or colour or sexuality. And it was harrowing to listen to some of the tales of those people who had been bullied on the internet because of their support of minority groups. So I think we have, as Councillor Smith so eloquently put it, we have to be ever vigilant against those forces of fascism. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to go for a recorded vote.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Please, each councillor, can you say clearly whether you're for, against and abstain? And can you use your microphone when you do it? Start with Councillor Ashley, as usual.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
For.
Councillor Bevan.
Microphone's not working. For.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
For.
Councillor Burnett.
For.
Councillor Cameron.
For.
Councillor Carron. For. Councillor Gwynaira Clark.
For.
Councillor Richard Clark.
For.
Councillor Constance.
For.
Councillor Crick.
For.
Councillor Cross? Not here. Councillor Cunningham?
4.
Councillor Daniels?
4.
Councillor Nigel Davis?
4.
Councillor Evans?
4.
Councillor Furzer?
4.
Councillor Graham?
4.
Councillor Harnett?
4.
Councillor Harris?
Abstain.
Councillor Haynes?
4.
Councillor Hunt?
4.
Councillor Jeremiah?
4.
Councillor Alan Jones? Councillor Lewis Jones?
4.
Councillor Kemp?
4.
Councillor Marshall? I didn't hear you, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Morby?
4.
Councillor Mills? 4. Councillor Owen?
4.
Councillor Parish? Can I ask you to use your microphone? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Powell?
4.
Councillor Rees?
4.
Councillor Smith?
4.
Councillor Taylor?
4.
Councillor Thomas?
4.
Councillor Waite?
4.
Councillor Wellington?
4.
Councillor Yole?
4.
Thank you. I'll count the numbers, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Okay, members, we had 37 votes for, no votes against, and 1 abstaining. Thank you, members. That was carried. Okay, agenda item 21, member question time. There are 3 members' questions for today. The questions are shown on the sheet circulated. So can I ask Councillor Maria Graham to ask her question, please.
Georg Var, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Question to Councillor Moby. Will the executive member for children and young people confirm that in the proposal for consultation on secondary education provision in Cumbraon, that both Fairwater and Lantanam schools will close and that all staff at this school will have their contracts ended? Thank you.
Can I ask Councillor Brian Morby, Executive Member for Children and Young People, to reply, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Thanks for the question. The consultation proposal is to close both schools and open a new school on the Fairwater site. If the proposals are approved, staff at both closing schools will be treated equally. Their contracts will end at the closure and they therefore will be at risk of redundancy. A temporary governing body will be created before the new school opens, and it will be responsible for determining the new school's staffing structure and appointing staff to it. Under council policy and the school's compact agreement, staff who are at risk will be given prior consideration for any suitable or potentially suitable open posts.
Thank you. Councillor Graham, you've got a supplementary question?
No, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Jeffries, would you like to ask your first question?
Diolch. What assurances can the Executive Member for Children and Young People give to parents or pupils attending Fairwater and Llantarnam schools that the one-to-one support that their children receive now will continue with the same personnel, however the schools may be merged?
Councillor Morby.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Although I'd like to guarantee parents that there will be no change to these arrangements, I cannot give that assurance. Staffing matters are a delegated responsibility of governing bodies, and as I've stated, should both schools close and a new school open, then all staff employed in the schools will be at risk of redundancy. In determining the new staffing structure, the governing body will need to assess the requirements of children with additional needs, including, of course, those currently receiving one-to-one support, and establish appropriate posts to meet those requirements. any staff at risk of redundancy should be given prior consideration for the posts established by the new governing body, and their skills will be matched through an assessment process to appoint to such posts.
Councillor Rees, you've got a supplementary?
Yeah. It may be that some of those children with additional learning needs, some of them may have transferred from and to Fairwater and Llantarnam because of bullying in those original schools. If these schools merge, they may have to confront those bullies again. What is the Council going to do to safeguard them?
Councillor Moby.
Thank you. There are already appropriate systems in place to manage bullying incidents at both schools, and I would anticipate that through transitional planning arrangements, this good practice would be preserved. However, as indicated following a question on bullying from Councillor Daniels a few months ago, the local authority is intending to implement a revised anti-bullying strategy for adoption by schools in April. This will include a revised and straightforward ICT-based system of recording bullying incidents, which should ensure consistency across schools. Training is planned for April to support the changes, and clearly particular attention will be given to those staff who hopefully will be appointed to the new school as part of the arrangement I previously described, in order to address the particular issues that Councillor Rees has referred to.
Thank you. Councillor Rees, would you like to ask your other question?
Yes. Does the leader now support the merger of Caerphilly, Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen as recommended by the Williams Commission, which was set up by the Labour Government?
Councillor Wellington, Leader of the Council.
Yeah. As members will know, the Williams Commission, which was established by the Welsh Government, is an independent body, reported its findings on the 20th of January. The report itself is 353 pages long and contains 62 recommendations. The content of the report, together with the potential impact of what has been proposed, is being analysed across the whole of Wales. Political parties, Labour included, are beginning the process of considering the ramifications of the recommendations, changes to Welsh public services, as set out in the report. As part of this, the First Minister has arranged a Labour Party consultation meeting on the Williams Commission report, and I'm certain other parties will be holding similar discussions. I'm sure Councillor Rees will agree that it would be unwise to make a statement upon any of these proposed mergers until such times as these discussions have been progressed. Whatever the future holds, our immediate priority is to serve the people living in Torfaen and provide them with a high-quality service, despite the economic challenges that all councils face.
Councillor Rees, you have a supplementary?
Yeah. Thanks for that answer, which I found very interesting. The Torfaen Labour Cabinet on the 13th of August decided to merge Torfaen with Blaenau Gwent and Monmouthshire, which isn't exactly what's been recommended in the Williams Commission. A possible merger with Monmouthshire might put European funding that people in Torfaen and projects in Torfaen receive at risk. For me, that's not a desirable outcome. Who's right in his opinion? Is it the Torfaen Cabinet that recommended a merger with Monmouthshire, or is it the Williams Commission which is recommending a merger with Caerphilly and Blaenau Gwent?
I'm sure Councillor Rees is going to appreciate my answer to this, because he's preempting the view of his own leader. What do I mean by that? On the Sunday Politics show on BBC Wales last Sunday, the 26th of January, at 10 to 12, Leanne Woods, the leader of Plaid Cymru, stated that Plaid Cymru is yet to consult its members on the Williams Commission. So before you ask me complicated but important questions about what's happening in Gwent, I think we should ask your leader what you were doing as a political party.
Okay. Right, move to agenda item 22, the date of next meeting. For your information, members, the next council meeting will be held on Tuesday, the 4th of March at 10 a.m. here in the council chamber. Agenda item 23, Cabinet decisions. Members, the Cabinet decisions were published last week. Copies have been circulated. There were no challenges to the decisions. Do members have any questions on any of the decisions? No. All okay to note the decisions? Thank you, members. The Cabinet decisions are noted. And that's the end of the meeting. Thank you.